Check the sound.
Yes.
Test, can you hear me? This is Greg, can you hear me?
Hi, Julie. Were you able to hear me? Yes, I can. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Um,
You can hear him? I could hear Natalia.
No, we tried to do sound from in here.
Don't need to. I can hear Natalia.
Okay, I heard her over YouTube.
Yes.
Okay, so Max and I are going to sort of do an inventory of what's in there later. And there's some equivalent of these, like the little things.
Yeah.
Like they're 2,000. Let's leave that on.
It's live now.
You can switch to the agenda number. I can't hear anything in here. Okay.
Let me improvise.
Why don't I leave open the door?
Yeah.
So whoever's doing slides from here, they'll open up those doors and Lori can sit somewhere else to do minutes. You can come in here. Okay. Is that okay? I need that computer though. Does that work?
Let's turn it off. Test, test. Test, 1, 2, 3, test. It's not coming through on the YouTube.
No.
Okay. Are you just on YouTube?
No. It's gone.
So you're not getting either?
No, and I didn't get it before.
Okay. What I'm wondering is why we could hear you before, but now we can't.
Yeah, but I don't care about that. I don't want to touch anything because YouTube is working.
Yeah.
I just need somebody to hear. Can you guys hear? If we're playing the audio here? Yes? You good? Okay. So we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so Laura, you can switch.
afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special council meeting of the city of Waterloo for Monday, November 2nd, 2020,
So,
at approximately 2:35 in the
well, it's,
afternoon.
you can now.
We will start today with a call, please, beginning with Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer, present.
Councilor Bali here.
Councillor Duke, present.
Julie ended up calling, because I was on the map.
Councillor Freeman, present.
But I think the issues are that we got, cheap connector pieces. Like when I went through and he said everything piece by piece, it was fine. I'm not sure who can access what, and what the ideas are for these things. So I think it's going through and trying to understand everything that's in place and go from there. So, did it go off again?
Yes.
Can you hear sound on their bill on YouTube? Oh.
And once we get that slide progressing forward, we'll see that the growth in electric vehicles registered in the region has continued to increase. Not at the rate we were seeing before, but well over 2,000 now within the region. And industry experts have indicated to us that they actually believe that electric vehicles will become on par with combustion engine vehicles in terms of price within the next 3 to 5 years. And that means that this number is going to grow really quickly. Charging stations as well have been growing significantly, including the ones at the Evolve One building, but also we work with organizations, municipalities, and the school boards to help install additional charging power. Next slide, please. Climate action, I will touch on a little bit, and then my partner Mary Jane will also be speaking to it in her delegation. We have now 3 targets. And one of the things that we know is that these targets are going to be an important driver in our community development as well as our strategic planning as a whole community. And I know that's going to come up later on in this meeting today. If you go to the next slide, please. We have a 5.2% reduction, 5.2% reduction already as part of our 6% target, and that we have an 80% emission reduction target that we have planned, and that was unanimously approved by this council for 2050. You could proceed to the next slide, please. Here's our little celebration. So next slide, that's the 8 by 50 target that we have. And if you could just proceed through these really quickly, Lori, it just shows all of the footprint details. We know that in 2010, which is the baseline year for the whole community, that our carbon footprint was primarily made up of 3 areas. So just keep proceeding through, please. And those are transportation as the largest in green here, organizations and business in orange, and then residential emissions in red. The other 2 being our agriculture and waste. Keep going. This was the numbers as you saw in 2010, which is the baseline, not only for our short-term target, but for the long term. And then keep going, you'll see the same for our 2015 re-inventory. So there was a small reduction in both business emissions and residential emissions, but we had an increase in the percentage of our footprint, thank you so much, in transportation. That's the importance of the work that we do. And then agriculture and waste stayed about the same. We are poised to do a re-inventory for 2020 and 2021. Of course, this could be a really interesting year to be looking at, and how we proceed with that is being discussed with our partners in the municipalities in light of COVID and the change of behavior, which has certainly been impacting our carbon footprint. Next slide, please. The Evolve project, as we all know, has been a feather in the cap of the city of Waterloo. We're so proud to have been part of it and to be partnering with the city on Evolve Green specifically. And so thankful for the support you've given to the Green for us to be able to come to create that culture of sustainability within the whole community. We've been working on some interesting pieces in the Evolve project, including a city labs model where we are looking to bring to the community, hopefully early next year, to support some of the challenges and the ideation to address the local sustainability challenges in our community. Last slide, please. But I would be remiss if I didn't end on this high note, and so I saved it to the end. As Mayor Jaworski and some of you are very well aware, Sustainable Waterloo Region Action Program gave an award this year, which what would have been our evening of recognition, but was presented on the radio through the Mike Farwell show to all 8 area municipalities. 2019 was a really pivotal year in sustainability in this region. Not only did we reach that milestone of setting a long-term climate action target of 8% reduced by 2050, and that was unanimously approved across the region. But we also had, for the very first time, every municipality declaring a climate crisis or climate emergency. We had every municipality now partnering with Sustainable Waterloo Region in our regional sustainability. And the feeling, the differences created was palpable, and thus we gave an award to all 8 municipalities together as a partnership of the year. It's the only award Sustainable Waterloo Region gave because it's such a significant event. And so we thank you as Waterloo City Council for your leadership in this, your long-term partnership in the work that you've been doing, and your future commitment for the great things that are going to happen here. Really excited for you to hear from Mary Jane about some of the future visioning that happened through the climate action process, and excited to be bringing you a strategy and plan in the months to come for how are we going to reach this low carbon, more prosperous future for everyone. So thank you for your time, your patience with the technical challenges, and happy to continue to support this region and the city of Waterloo in creating this future. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much to the unflappable Tova Davidson with technical issues that you're working through here. That's one thing I can say for sure. And I did bring into our council meeting today our award.
Indeed, we do always try to make our awards unique and memorable. The awards here are made by students at Conestoga College. All of the wood that's used in the award is reclaimed, local, old barn boards, etc. The resin on the top that creates the blue portion is a recycled resin, which is unique and difficult to find. The beauty of this award, if we ever have a chance to bring them together, is that all municipalities have similar awards, and they actually nest together to make one big award. So you each have your own piece, but together they are greater than the sum of the parts, just like this community.
Excellent. What a wonderful analogy, Tova. Do I have any questions or commentary on Tova's presentation from my counselors?
What?
Hearing none. Again, thank you for your information. Thank you very much for the annual report, the year review as well that was delivered to our office here. Lots of reviews here, but as more background to which we're able to enjoy today, thanks to getting through it. So thank you very much, Tova. Enjoy the rest of the day, and really appreciate your presenting to the city and also the award. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. And with that, we move on to item B, which is the Wreath annual report. And we have Mary Jane Patterson on the line. Welcome, Mary Jane.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're coming through loud and clear. That's excellent, Mary Jane.
Okay, that's great. Well, good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, councilors, and staff. It is an honor to follow Tova and her report from our colleagues at Sustainable Waterloo Region. You can bring our slides up anytime that they cooperate. Pleasure to speak to you all this afternoon and to share Wreath Green Solutions Impact Report with you. We're looking back over the past year here, and our fiscal year ended just as COVID began. And we also have our accumulated impact over 21 years of Wreath. So I know you all have the report, and our slides will show some of the results, and I'll be giving you a little context around each one. As you know, Wreath Green Solutions is an environmental charity and social enterprise. Our goal is to help us all live more sustainably. Now, the next part would be slide 2, and I wonder if I should just wait for a moment.
Yeah, why don't we just wait again? I think we're not really sure why we're not rendering, but we'll be back with you very soon.
Okay.
We're just looking at the one computer that's being played in navigation, so quite a couple minutes.
All right. Shall I proceed? You could go to the next one.
And I can just finish. There we are, slide.
3. So do it just one before is where we're at.
So I think we're fine. Okay, can you go to this? Yeah, perfect, thank you.
I think that's going in the other direction.
Let's just say, we
There you
know,
go.
we know what we're doing, giving you talk cooperating.
Yeah, gotcha, okay. All right, well, our newest way to help people live sustainably is through tree stewardship. And for many communities, the majority of their urban forest is on private rather than municipal property. If they want to increase the urban tree cover, they must work with homeowners, and that's where we come in. This year, we've been really happy to be working with Kitchener and Cambridge to support residents in planting new trees and learning how to care for the existing trees on their property. And we hope to extend this partnership to include the city of Waterloo in the future. Here's our results so far with just the first year under our belt. The tree planting was held up this spring by the COVID lockdown, and we just caught up this fall getting the backlog into the ground. Next slide. Now on to water conservation. We're in our 6th year of providing free water audits on behalf of the region of Waterloo. These are for high water use homes or those interested in the region's new water softener plumbing rebate. I checked our records, and in the past 5 years of this service, we've come to 338 City of Waterloo consoles and installed free water saving measures in 280 of them. Waterloo residents might be interested to know that there's now a rebate of $50 for switching the plumbing of their water softener to soften hot water only. The audit was up for a few months due to COVID, but we're back at it now with careful COVID precautions in place. We also work with homeowners on saving water outside the home to show them how to manage stormwater so that it can soak into the ground and restore our groundwater. And doesn't become runoff that pollutes our local waterways. This year we were happy to work with Stormwater and park staff at the City of Waterloo to plan and build a rain garden demonstration at the Waterloo Service Center. Physically distanced volunteers from the community put the garden in the ground in October. This high visibility site will provide ongoing opportunities for people to learn about rain gardens and their benefits. I think what's cool about this work is the way it also helps people make a healthy, beautiful yard at the same time. Next slide. Another project that works to restore groundwater, prevent flooding, and reduce runoff. Deep Pave Paradise. We love the Deep Pave projects we've been able to do in the region. It's pretty cathartic, working with volunteers to rip up pavement and put in plants and trees that bring beauty and shade to the area. So far, we've worked with 2 schools, including Eastway Public School in Waterloo and 1 board of trade, and we've been able to bring the funding that supports our work, organizing and coordinating the project. Next slide. So now here's the work that you know us for the most. In the past 21 years, we've evaluated the energy efficiency of 17,000 homes in Waterloo region. Half of these have followed through on our recommendations to install energy upgrades, and their actions have reduced 27,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Looking to the future, we're working with our municipalities, including the City of Waterloo, to be able to provide low-interest financing for homes to encourage more and deeper energy retrofits. A newer initiative for us in the past couple of years has been Project Neutral, the online platform I introduced you to last year. It helps us each calculate our own emissions and what we can do about them, and it is an entry point through waste, water, travel, as well as home energy efficiency. You can see that over 1,500 people have now logged on to learn more about their own emissions at home. And we've had some great results through lunch and learns with businesses, even carrying on to the virtual these past few months. Next slide, please. So let me add to Toba's comments about Climate Action WR. This is what our energy work directly contributes to in our local climate action plan and our long-term target of 80% by 2050. That's a big challenge, and in our partnership with SWR and all of the municipalities, we were able to collectively bring 2 years worth of funding to help us create the long-term action plan to reach that target. You can see here all of the community consultation that's going to helping us build that plan. The funding also allowed us to bring capacity building workshops for municipal staff on topics like energy storage, carbon budgeting, and embodied carbon. And we still have recordings available for those if there's anyone who missed the first round. As Joe said, we hope to have an action plan that we'll be bringing to council this winter. Next slide. A big part of what we do is community outreach in many different ways, including the very exciting Zero Waste Challenge. This is such a neat way to join us in paying attention to our waste and what we can do to reduce what we send to landfill. For just 7 days, anything that can't be composted or recycled goes into a mason jar. And I have mine all ready to show you, and it just dawned on me midway through Joe's presentation that you're not going to be able to see that. Or my green presentation jacket. The 7-day challenge ended a week ago, and Mayor Jaworski, it was so fun to see your posts on social media about this. I want to say a big thank you to everyone that participated and shared on social media this year. That's real leadership, showing the community that this is important. I finished the 30-day challenge on Saturday, and if you could see my jar, you would see that I got into a little bit of trouble. There's some Misfits and M&M peanuts packages sticking out the top. And this was about last week when there was a grant due, and that's when it happened. But that's okay, because the point of this is to learn from what's going on in this jar and think about how I can shop differently to reduce it. So that's what this gives us all in making a change. For me, it's going to be bulk buying instead of M&M peanuts. Next slide, please. Donations are incredibly helpful in supporting Wreath's work, especially unfunded initiatives like the Zero Waste Challenge and a lot of our outreach activities. It's a way to directly support local environmental action, and we so appreciate our donors. Next slide. We're pleased to say that we returned to a positive balance this past year. In the last few years, we've been investing in program development, and that has come to fruition. We also strive to have a diversity of sources of revenue as a way to build in some resilience. On that resilience this year, with the impact of COVID causing some of our programs to come to a halt for several months. Next slide. Here's one image that really gives you a sense of that diversity in programs and partners. This wealth of collaboration is the key to our success. Final slide, please. I'll end with our most important message. Thank you. Waterloo North Hydro provides core funding to Wreath, and we are so grateful for that. It gives us the capacity to bring programs and resources to our community and in support of the city's own strategic goals that I know you'll be hearing about an update on following this. Together, we're helping people live more sustainably. Thank you all.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Jane. The 7-day challenge. Each year I start off very positively that I'm doing everything possible short of cheating. I think we get yogurt container cost, or the sticker on the banana last year, or other things. It becomes, I think that's good with the Zero Waste Challenge brings to me, is that you really have to work out much like I think you found out with the Ben & Jerry's ice cream container.
Oh, yeah.
It's not recyclable, and you think twice as just a container, but it's in fact garbage, unfortunately. So thank you very much for always allowing us to highlight that. It's very encouraging. I did it simply as a single person, and only for the 7 days. I can't imagine those who did it for longer. I do have a comment here from Councilor Bonner. Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to thank you, Mary Jane, and also Toba, if you still happen to be on the line, for everything you are doing. I feel like with all the things within the region and the region itself and all of the businesses banding together with your organizations kind of at the helm, I feel like we're really, really getting somewhere. And I just want to thank you so much for the early leadership that you've shown and the strength you bring as we all try and go in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll go to Councillor Freeman, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Mary Jane and Tova. I just want to thank you as well for just making the region of Waterloo the leaders that they are surrounding these issues. When Mary Jane and I have had the opportunity through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to attend some events and speak together as partners in sustainability. I don't know about you, Mary Jane, but it's always surprising to hear from folks who are participating just how far ahead the region of Waterloo is. We take it for granted. The relationships that we have with Sustainable Waterloo, we take for granted. The fact that all municipalities in the region declared a climate emergency because we all think it's the right thing to do, and so we do it. But the truth is we are leaders more broadly across Canada as it relates to sustainability, and it's all because of the work of Sustainable WR and the leadership that these two organizations are providing to all of us in Waterloo. And I just don't know how to thank you for all of that. And it's such a privilege to represent that through SCM, and I always feel like I'm taking credit for a lot of other people's work. But it's an amazing, and it's all because.
Thank you. I'll say thank you for Tova too. We are lucky when we go to those kinds of forums and see other municipalities. We have really good working relationships here that help us be stronger together.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillors, for your comments. Thank you, Mary Jane, for your presentation and for all the work that you do, and especially these trying times. Good to see your finances are still improved. Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.
See you. Oh, thanks, Tova. Good to see you're still around and staying home. Next up, staff report. And item A is the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan and our 2020 progress report. It's the report prepared by Sandy Little, and Sandy has a presentation for us. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of council and staff. I'm here this afternoon to highlight for you the progress made this year on the implementation of the strategic plan and to provide a brief outline of a proposed reporting framework to measure our progress across the corporation. The proposed reporting framework is not meant to be static, but something that will be augmented in the next 2 years using new measures as they become available while relying on a core base. Next slide, please. Moving forward together, on June 24th, 2019, Council approved a brand new strategic plan to guide the corporation on a path for the current Council. The strategic plan consists of 6 pillars, 7 guiding principles, 6 goals, and 19 objectives. We're in place until 2022. It marked a new direction for strategic plans for the city. Upon adoption, staff began working on implementing the plan through capital and operating budgets and the various initiatives contained in the business plans. Over the last few months, I have had the opportunity to meet with members of council to gain a better understanding of challenges and successes in each of the 7 wards, as well as learn the pillars of the strategic plan that are of the utmost importance to them. It's not a surprise that it's all of them. As a corporation, we need a framework in place to measure the city's success in meeting and achieving the goals and objectives of the plan. Using a few tips, staff will be able to identify areas that we should continue to forge ahead on, as well as highlighting areas that require additional resources and. Next slide, please. Reporting framework. There are 3 main components to the proposed reporting framework, which I have coined as the Big 3. The first is the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. The SDGs are a call for action all to promote prosperity while protecting the planet. They are a blueprint to attain a more sustainable future. Our strategic plan is closely aligned to a number of the SDGs. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015. In order to localize the SDGs, we need to ask ourselves, how are we working towards these goals in our own community? How are we working towards no poverty, gender equality, or responsible consumption and production? There are ways communities can meaningfully contribute to these goals. This work is in its initial stages and is not yet fully realized. Staff will bring forward a report to Council in the near future with how this work is being done in our own community. ISO 37120 Sustainable Cities and Communities includes 104 indicators for city services and quality of life. It is the first international standard on city data. As you are well aware, we were platinum certified in March 2020 as we reported on 95 of the 104 indicators as part of a pilot project with the World Council on City Data, or WCCD, and Infrastructure Canada. We have begun the process for gathering data as part of Year 2, which will include 2019 data. Year 2 will allow us to analyze the data and identify trends now that we have the baseline in place. The more years that we get under our belt, the more information we will have to identify areas we should continue to focus on that serve us well, in addition to new areas that demand our attention. Next slide, please. The last piece of the puzzle is the initiatives contained within the business plans. After consultation with staff, I was able to review all of the initiatives, and each project was assigned a status according to the categorization that was developed by staff over the last few years. Green for on track, yellow for delayed, and red for on hold or at risk. Of the 79 initiatives, 45 or 57% of the initiatives are on track. 33 or 42% were delayed, and only one initiative is on hold. This is a true testament to staff's ability to in a challenging year. In my report, I highlight a number of initiatives that were included in the business plans, which we progressed during an unpredictable year. Furthermore, staff's efforts were further recognized through the receipt of a variety of rewards for various projects, also been highlighted as part of my report. In addition to the initiatives identified in the business plans, there are a number of ongoing projects that staff has been working on. Some of these initiatives include the Corporate Climate Change Adaptation Plan and the Corporate Climate Action Plan. And in some cases, there are brand new initiatives, such as the Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan. In October 2019, Council approved a City of Waterloo specific action plan to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action. This action plan responds to the calls to action more broadly and is a starting point on the city's journey to develop meaningful relationships and work toward reconciliation with local First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Next slide, please. COVID-19. As a result of the pandemic, a large portion of the work that was contemplated for 2020 has been delayed, as is evident in the status of some of the business plan initiatives. Of the initiatives that were delayed in 2020, 28 or 85% were delayed as a result of COVID-19, which in some cases was because of staff being reassigned to more pressing work, or in the early part of the pandemic, not being able to complete work involved in projects such as public engagement. Staff is hopeful that over the next several months, delays in projects may be recovered. In the face of COVID-19, staff have had to pivot to address the challenges. This pivot, as well as this strategic for the corporation, has been instrumental in allowing the city to be in the position it is in today. Although some of the work that was not anticipated was to address the pandemic itself, some new initiatives surfaced, which serve to further the goals and objectives of the strategic plan. One example is to support our local economic recovery, or SOLAR initiative, which was a collaborative effort by multiple divisions and was a true testament to the ability of staff during a difficult time. Another significant initiative as a direct result of COVID was the economic relief plan led by the finance division. Staff actions to provide financial relief to residents and businesses to provide support to our community. Efforts related to both initiatives are ongoing as we move into the 9th month of the pandemic, and there may be additional initiatives as we proceed through this unprecedented time. All of these projects have the ability to contribute in terms of implementing our strategic plan. Next slide, please. Next steps. As we move into year 3 of the strategic plan, what progress will we make and how will we continue to measure this progress? In terms of the localization of the SDGs, there will be a staff report forthcoming for the sustainability coordinator that will speak to the progress of this at the local level. We will better understand the status of each of the goals in our own community and what we will need to do to create a more sustainable environment for all. Regarding ISO 37120, we're moving into year 2 of the project where data collection has already begun. A new portal has been created by WCC that will allow us to compare our data to other communities in the country and across the globe. Allow us to identify areas that we need to place more focus on, as well as celebrate our strengths, which is crucial at this time. And finally, with business plan initiatives, staff will aim to recover delays while also moving forward with all projects, even in the face of the pandemic. COVID is not the only story of 2020, but it is a part of it. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to share something that came out of one of my meetings with a member of council. This particular councillor indicated that we finally have a plan that is truly strategic in nature. Little did we know it would serve as a roadmap during an unprecedented time. I, for one, am looking forward to seeing where it takes us in the year ahead. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Well done, Sandy, and Tim, well done, team. You know, in all the first ever crisis and declared emergency that has continued to make such progress despite all the challenges of keeping our citizens safe and trying to reopen things as safely as possible. You know, I think it's really incredible what people have been able to, what staff have been able to do and still hunker down and get stuff done. I just have some councillors on the list here. Councillor Bobley and Councillor Henry, please go ahead.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. I just like to echo what Mayor Jaworski is saying to you, Sandy, and to Tim and the rest of the team on this work. I know from conversations with my council colleagues that the strategic plan is one of the things that we're most proud of that we've worked on over the first 2 years of this council term. So thank you for this progress report. I really would like to also take the opportunity to say thank you to some of the members of SAC, the Sustainability Advisory Committee, who worked in the early in the conversations with Anne-Marie Cipriani on the ISO 37120 and localizing the SDG conversation, which both 2 of those things are highlighted in your big 3 there, which I was very happy to see. And I think it's really great that we're starting to collect data on some of these topics, because as we know, the old saying is that what gets measured gets done. So I think we're heading very much in the right direction there. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to point to something in the report under the equity, inclusion, and sensible belonging pillar. There's a comment in there which I think is very appreciated, really important. It says that the Black Lives Matter movement globally and locally, as well as the Land Back movement locally, has sort of pointed to a potential shift in focus and approach regarding the project surrounding that pillar on equity, inclusion, and sense of belonging. I think beyond sort of the idea of a shift in focus and approach, I think the community has pretty loudly voiced that not only a shift in focus and approach, but also a shift in timeliness and priority pointed to this topic. And I'm wondering if perhaps you can speak to that, and perhaps if you could provide any context to anything that council can do to sort of expedite the work that's going on around this particular pillar, which is getting so much attention in the community locally and globally, as you know in the report.
Sure, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bobley. I completely agree that it's not just the focus and the approach that is being raised in the timing of this. I'm not aware of the particulars in terms of what the division that's actually producing this work is looking to do and what type of involvement. additional involvement that they would be looking for. It's certainly something that I can take away, unless Mark Dykstra wants to provide comment, because I know that this particular initiative is under community services, but it's certainly something that I can take away, and we can certainly identify anything that council or that staff can do to certainly assist with the timeliness of this initiative.
Sandy, do you hear me okay?
I do, Mark.
Yeah, okay. To Councillor Bonnelly, through the mayor. Great question. Thank you for bringing this forward. And really where we need to be is taking the time to listen right now, understand the issues prior to putting down into, words and on paper and communicating what we think is the right next step. So we're doing that through our community program and outreach team through Beth, Jim, and Pam. They're doing that, listening to understand what we need to do moving forward. Right now, with council, your role is bring forward, the conversation as you are in these types of forums and meetings, and to as we bring forward items, support in advance that as we move forward. So, great question. Look forward to the work advancing.
Thank you. And over to you, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Sandy, comments, and then I do have a question as well. Thank you for your excellent report, and I really do like the framework of reporting in the way that you've put the information together. And it is amazing that during all the COVID-19 changes and pivoting that staff have had to do, that we're still seeing a great number of the initiatives continue to move forward, which is great. That's a thank you to everyone. My question is around the items that are delayed, and in a lot of them, the reason was COVID-19 is as a delay. We still are going to be in the mode with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future. Are there any of the initiatives that are in the delayed columns that you were particularly worried about or concerned, or are there other considerations council may need to be giving to these particular initiatives to keep them moving forward?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Hammer, I don't think any of the initiatives that were identified as being were flagged as needing additional focus or additional delays were being anticipated. As I reported, 28 of the 33 that were delayed were as a result of COVID, but for various reasons. Some of them including public engagement early on in the pandemic. Public engagement really was very limited. I think now that we're adopting new forms of technology and devising new types of engagement, I think for those projects that were reliant on public engagement to move forward, those can now move forward. In other cases, it was a matter of staff pivoting. Now that we're several months in, I think a lot of those initiatives will continue to move forward to different degrees. We're certainly optimistic that over the next several months that we'll be able to make up for some of those delays. But to answer your question, none of those that were identified as being delayed were identified as being red or at risk or on hold. The work was still being done, albeit a little bit slower.
Okay, thank you for that, and I look forward to further reports as staff continue to progress our initiatives. That's it for me, Mayor. Back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammer, and I see that is it, Sandy. So thank you very much for the presentation and keeping things keeping us well informed on all that's going on with our mutual strategic plan. Thank you very much, Sandy. I do need somebody to move this. I'd like to go to the Finance Strategic Chair, Councillor Henry, to consider those minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Sandy. Yes, absolutely happy to receive this as information, to move that motion to vote in favor. And I'll add that it was helpful to just sort of see the rundown of initiatives. In my mind, a few ones I was curious about the status of and allowed me to sort of follow up with staff and see what we can do to keep moving those along. So I appreciate the thoroughness of the report.
And this is Councillor Bonneville. I second the motion and vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, in favor.
Councillor Bonnelly in favor.
Councillor Wreath, in favor. Councillor Bassick, in favor. Councillor Freeman, in favor. Sorry, Councillor Bassick, in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That's good. Thank you very much, Sandy. Before we move on to item B, I'd just like to draw your attention to all the viewers up there that there's a deferred item due with Killam zone change application, which was going to be considered today, has been deferred to a later date and will not be considered by council today, November 2nd, 2020. Moving on to item B is the Waterloo Memorial Rec Complex funding allocation request. Report prepared for us by Kevin Van and also the Kim is here to answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions on that item? And I will look to, I see Councillor and then we go to Councillor Longworth. This is her ward. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, team, on this item. We knew this was expected when we provided approval for the project to move forward when approval was provided early at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's well underway. That we did need to top up the contingency, given with the bid. I'd like to commend the team for all the work they've done to sharpen the pencils to get this number down significantly, and I'm glad that it's a number we can accomplish with this project moving forward to completion. So with that, I'm happy to move the recommendation and vote in favor.
This is Councillor Bonneville here. I'm happy to second the motion and vote in favour. And I'd just like to add as well that it's really exciting to see the project moving forward already. There's stuff to see on the ground and we haven't been past the site, and it'll be great to see it finished.
Councillor Hanmer, in favor.
Councillor Bonnelly in favor.
Councillor Wreath, in favor. Councillor Freeman, in favor. Councillor Bassick, in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Kevin and Kim, for being on the line. Looks like great progress going on there, Kevin. So thank you very much for being out about that along with the whole team here. So I'm glad to see that. Admiral Rec Center continuing to progress. It's a time when people are post-COVID and ready to get out there and do things together. Item number C is the 2020 Asset Management Plan. By Cassandra Milos, and the presentation by Cassandra Casey, Management.
Hi, can you hear me, Mayor Jaworski?
I can hear you, Cassandra.
So, Mayor, members of Council, thank you for having Milos and I here today. The intent of this presentation is to share a few asset management successes. Next slide, please. The successes that we're going to talk about today are our story and the impact of the additional infrastructure funding that was approved as part of the 2020 to 2022 budget process. We're going to share some successes related to stormwater management ponds, and we're going to talk about what's coming up. Next slide, please. While asset management has been occurring for decades, the formalization and documentation of asset management in order to share information with council and the community is relatively new. In 2016, we took a big leap forward with council's approval of the city's first comprehensive asset management plan, which used data from the Waterloo Decision Support System, also known as the DSS. Since that time, we have updated approved asset data. A few assets in our underground infrastructure and fleet are being DSS directly from their source systems, which means we are using existing processes and resources effectively and efficiently. We are using the data within the DSS to inform the cross-asset tool to assist rehabilitation and replacement decisions for right away. As part of the budget process, asset management uses the DSS to determine the percentage of needs by asset class and by year. Financial planning then uses to allocate the available rehabilitation and replacement funding, primarily the Capital Infrastructure Investment Reserve Fund and Gas Tax Reserve Fund. To assist effective decision making, asset management provides a list of assets identified by the DSS that need rehabilitation or replacement. Subject matter experts manage what assets are treated with the available funding allocated to them through the budget process. As asset needs exceed the available funding, professional management by subject matter experts is critical, as they have the political and societal factors needed for effective decision making, such as knowing an upcoming development project or aligning the work to avoid construction of multiple roads in one area of the city. Asset management uses the DSS to create a budget and target scenarios, which are then used to calculate the average annual infrastructure funding gap. The asset management plan tabled before council today is the second comprehensive asset management plan. In collaboration with the city's communication team, a page dedicated to asset management has been developed and is available as of today. The page is designed to share free snapshots of asset management data while meeting the OREG 58817 requirements to post the asset management plan and policy on the city's website. Next slide, please. Council approved increased infrastructure funding as part of the 2020 to 2022 budget process, with a cumulative annual infrastructure funding increase of $2.1 million by 2022. The increased funding means that there is $4 million in additional funding for asset rehabilitation or replacement activities in the 2020 to 2022 timeframe, and $15 million over the 2023 to 2029. The funding was allocated to 4 areas: transportation, parks, information technology, and facilities. And each area is responsible for bringing capital plans for these funds to police is requested. Next slide, please. The 2020 to 2022 rehabilitation and replacement activities that parks will be undertaking as a result of the additional funding is rehabilitating the parking lot and retaining wall within Hillside Park, accelerating the replacement of playgrounds throughout the city. The funding currently identified for 2023 and beyond will be confirmed as part of the future budget processes, and capital plans will be developed at that time. Transportation and engineering work together to develop a plan for 2020 to 2022, as well as a proposal for 2023 to 2020, using the assumption that the increased funding, transportation funding, will be approved as part of future budget processes. This resulted in plans to rehabilitate 14 walkway links, resurface 4.5 kilometers of trails, and advancing 14 road reconstructions, 9 from within the original forecast and 5 being brought in from the over-target list. Due to changing 2020 priorities resulting from the unanticipated impacts of COVID-19, facilities design and management and information management technology services will be bringing their infrastructure replacement and rehabilitation needs reports in 2021. Next slide, please. To help us tell the story of how the city's asset management story has been evolving over time, the next stormwater management pond story, how it has evolved. The graph on the screen before you is the 2016 asset management plan graph. It represents the first one for stormwater management ponds. This graph tells us that based on the best available data, creation rates, and available funding, that approximately 90% of stormwater management ponds were reflecting a very poor performance in 2017 and 2018. Can have on asset performance. In this situation, the City of Waterloo awarded $3.9 million to the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund, and together with $1.3 million of state funding, improved the performance of 9 stormwater management ponds. This resulted in the projected performance of stormwater management ponds improving by almost 20% over those 2 years. Next slide, please. This next graph, before you now, is from the 2020 Asset Management Plan and represents the projected performance of stormwater management ponds over the next 25 years. In particular, this graph shows the impact of funding included in the approved 2020 to 2022 capital budget, 23 to 2029 capital forecast, as well as updated data from the Stormwater Master Plan approved by Council earlier this year. In the 2016 Asset Management Plan, almost 90% of stormwater management ponds reflected a very poor or poor performance profile. However, due to the funding Council approved and the work completed by staff over the past 2 years, the 2020 graph reflects approximately 30% of stormwater management ponds reflecting a poor performance profile. Next slide, please. So what's next? For several years, the city has built momentum in advancing municipal asset management principles and practices, and staff are looking to continue to build on top of these successes. We are looking to finalize the community and technical level service metrics for non-core assets. Example of non-core assets are parks, information, health, technology, facilities, fire, and forestry. In addition, we are required by Ontario Regulation 58817 to include organizations that we consolidate into our financial statements, and as a result, we'll be looking to incorporate assets owned by the Waterloo Public Library and the BIA. There are 2 improvement categories of asset management we'll be focusing on. They include improving the efficiency of information flow from staff to the DSS by minimizing the effort the staff needs to do, which is utilizing processes. This is considered an essential strategy to success. We are also looking to improve the sophistication of infrastructure performance and corresponding expenditure forecasts. Both will increase decision-making effectiveness with respect to selecting the most appropriate infrastructure improvements and their timing. They also contribute to solving one of the most difficult challenges for organizations in general, which is minimizing previously anticipated cost while achieving the same anticipated performance. It is important to note that advanced asset management practices is a partnership between subject matter experts such as operational and maintenance staff, engineering, finance, senior management, and elected officials. The ability of city staff to work together and cross-functional teams will continue to be the key to success. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time, and both Milos and I are available and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kat. You know, it's great to see a shocking good presentation that this really shows that effort by council staff and you and Milos and everybody around in categorizing everything and tracking. I think Council Bodley mentioned that, you know, you set goals and then you can measure it. This shows how we've been able to measure it. I think I'll take the opportunity to send those 3 slides that you have there to our local MP. Actually, I just walked over to our office and I see she's in there today, and just to show what that investment, how much that has meant to us on our asset plan. It's just a shocking amount of red that has disappeared in that. I'll look to a councillor for any questions, and if not, I'll turn it over to Finance Chair, Councillor Henry, to move this along. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Cass, to you and the team in asset management, as well as all of our experts across all of our various asset classes that are doing the hard work every day to make sure we have the right information to put every dollar to the best possible use in making sure that the high quality of assets that we generally are experiencing now is something that we have a chance to maintain in the future by significantly closing this gap. And I would say this as we continue to work our way through this council term. Just before the pandemic in February, council made an incredibly momentous decision to take that big step towards closing that infrastructure gap. And over this term of council, we're getting over 12% of the way there. That's a big chunk of that gap taken out. And that was important then. It was important for us to do that for the long-term health of our infrastructure that supports our growing community and its quality of life. But it is even more important now. And if there's one headline from this, it's that our infrastructure investments in this term of council that are part of our budgets in this term of council are making living through this pandemic better for people all across the city. Cass highlighted a few examples here. 14 trail links. These are links that help people get neighborhood to parks and trees and to find ways to get exercise and make their essential trips. These are trails that hadn't been touched since they were originally put in, and they desperately need rehabilitation. Our investments are making it easier to walk around your neighborhood every day. To get to playgrounds that need rehabilitating, we're bringing several more playgrounds forward in the budget so that children can get out and enjoy outdoor spaces that are safer and healthier for them to do than staying inside. And that's an equity investment too, because not everybody has a backyard to go to be able to get that kind of experience. And these are so vitally important now and will continue to be into the future. And roads, when we rehabilitate roads, whether you're driving on them or whether you're cycling on them or whether you're walking on them, rehabilitated roads work better for people. And moving those forward and doing more of those faster across the city is answering a call of every resident that I've ever heard across the city who wants the roads to be less bumpy, and wants the sidewalks to be smooth and able to reverse, and wants to be able to get more cycling infrastructure going. These investments we're making with this are providing more and better sidewalks when we rehabilitate these roads, as well as providing safe ways to get around our city. So in every way, the investments this council committed to making in our 3-year budget on infrastructure, those monumental investments, are making it easier and better for people all across the city during this pandemic and into the future. So I commend council for its leadership there and its continued leadership here, and I commend our staff team for being able to deliver these programs and projects despite the challenges that we're all facing, because moving forward together is so very important. So with that, I'm happy to move the recommendation that's before us and to vote in favor of it.
This is Councillor Bonneville. I am happy to second the motion and will vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, in favour.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Wreath, in favour. Councillor Freeman, in favour. Councillor Bassick, in favour.
And the mayor's in favor too. Well done, thank you staff, and good job for everyone moving forward with the asset management plan. Thank you. Next up, item D is the interim tax levy prepared for us by Jody Gooden and Paul. I think that's here for questions. If you have any questions from council. Seeing none, I suspect that not. It's our interim tax levy. We'll turn it over to council how you move forward.
Happy to move the recommendation and vote in favor.
This is Councillor Bonneville. I second the motion and vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, in favour.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Wreath, in favour. Councillor Freeman, in favour. Very good. Councillor Bassick, in favour.
And the mayor's in favor too. That's good, Jen. I want to make sure you're here for item E. Thank you very much for the taxation team for bringing this forward so we can have money to run the place next year. Item E, implementation of the second sidewalk on South Cross K Crescent between Weaver Street North and Moses Springer Park Trail. Report prepared for us by Gavin Vermeer. He's available for questions along with Dana. Does anybody have any questions? I will turn it over to Board Councilor Bassick. Go ahead, please.
Thanks so much, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I have a few questions. I know staff have been working a lot with me and residents, and I just want to ask some questions that have come up through the process. concerns from residents who are worried about trees and interested in exploring other options and knowing a little bit more about the process. So just 4 questions, hoping you can answer for me. So just curious what the impact on trees might be for adding the sidewalk.
Gavin here, can you guys hear me?
Please go ahead, Gavin.
Yep. So through you, Mayor Jaworski, there will be no need to remove any trees under any of the options that we're considering for McKay. Options 1, 2, and 3 will have no impact on tree roots. Option 4 will be in closer proximity to the trees. However, we are not anticipating any issues that would negatively impact roots, as sidewalks don't require deep excavation, and we regularly work in close proximity to tree roots without issue.
Okay, great, thank you. That's good news. So just for the process for deciding on the options, there are 4 options. So curious if and how the public will be involved or informed of the of selecting the options.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, if the report is approved, city staff will be selected option on Engage Waterloo, and once we go to present the interim design on Engage Waterloo, we'll also deliver notices to residents at that time.
Okay, thanks. Can residents have provide further input on the option? Oh, sorry, that's what they would be able to do after you submit the notice. They could contact you again with some more input if they wanted to, not sort of like a formal pick process, but they could still reach out.
To you, Mayor Jaworski, that is correct, yes.
Great, okay. And then, I mean, one of the challenges of having no sidewalk and then having a sidewalk is that you end up having to shovel this new sidewalk that you didn't have to before. So given it's a connection between the trail at Moses Springer and the trail at Weaver, are there any options for the city plowing that along their route?
To Mayor Jaworski, under the current conditions, the city's Parks and Forestry Department will not plow the sidewalk. In discussions with Environment and Parks, currently not resourced to do this. If that level of service change is something that council is interested in, it would probably need to be addressed through the next budget cycle.
Is it possible that this will be a route that's looked at through through prioritizing snow removal, the network and the priority network before the next budget? Like, will we be looking at that at all before the next budget?
Through Mayor Jaworski, I would need to discuss that with those that are running that study.
Okay, all right. Okay, maybe, yeah, if you could pass that back to them, that would be great. And the other thing that residents were wondering about, because it is a low traffic volume and speed, we have that data to confirm that. Wondering if there are any other potential options. So a couple that we talked about were, residents saying that people tend to use the street anyways because people don't feel super unsafe there because of the low traffic volume and speed. So is this would this be a good candidate, the street, for a Wooner type shared street?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, a purposely designed shared street, or Wooner, as Councillor Bassett indicated, would not be appropriate in this instance, as it does not meet the requirements that would be needed to make a Wooner successful, and would be much more costly.
What are the requirements for I forget what you call it. I call it a Wooner, but what is the actual technical name?
To you, Mayor Jaworski, yeah, Wooner is the sort of the going name. You could just call it shared street. But a lot of the requirements would be, it needs to be a focal point. There needs to be certain conditions met with regards to usage of the street, on-street parking requirements, numerous requirements that all generally need to be met, and low-density residential neighborhoods such as this just does not meet those requirements.
Okay, thanks. And then the other option that residents and I talked about were, because there is already a sidewalk on the north side, that would there be a possibility, would it be to connect the entrance at Moses Springer, the path there, somehow make like a direct connection to the north sidewalk so that you wouldn't have to go over the boulevard and the curb there, so people would feel like the access to sidewalks is more seamless should they wish to go to the north side. So is that a potential option, or was it considered?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that is a potential option that we considered and may implement anyway. However, it doesn't address the desired site or desire lines that pedestrians are showing that walking on the south side of the road. So it may not address the issue of keeping pedestrians off the road.
Okay, and is it safe to cross and then like go on the sidewalk, and then if you have to get back to the trail, like does it increase or does it decrease safety by crossing it a couple of extra points? That's what the report kind of indicated, is you have these 2 extra points to cross. So does it make it, sorry, my kid just got home from school. Does it decrease safety at all having to cross at those 2 points based on what it said on the report?
Through Mayor Jaworski, that is correct, that you are adding conflict point once road to the sidewalk, and then again across the road at the intersection of Weaver and McKay, which is a potential pedestrian vehicle conflict point, which you do safety.
Okay, great. Thank you for responding to all those questions and taking back that piece about the prioritization rates for snow removal too. Thank you.
And I don't see any further questions, Councillor Bassett. So, board councillor, there's a recommendation here that you hope you consider moving forward.
Yeah, I'm very happy to move this. We spent a lot of and vote in favor of it. I've spent a lot of time with residents, talking to residents, and Gavin has put in a ton of work in responding to questions that I so appreciate. And I wanted to entertain as many different ideas as possible, because I feel like when you do that, something might surface that maybe is a really good alternative that can help us to meet our goals as a council to become Vision Zero and to make it safe and easy for people to get around town on all modes of transportation. So I thought maybe there would be some other option. And to be quite frank, I can't in good faith not move this or vote in favor of it, because it will increase safety, even though people use the road. I think that there's a chance that you have a greater likelihood of being hit if you're on the road. And so this is going to seamlessly and more safely connect the pieces of the trail. And as we are trying to become a real future city for active transportation and to address the climate emergency, we need to be making it as easy and safe to get around. And that's not to say I don't appreciate the disruption and change that's going to come for the residents who live around there. They really worked hard to explore different potential options with me too, and appreciate, for the most part, the direction and policy direction that comes from council. And so also worked really a lot with me to explore different options and are in a really good way, I think, and they got started early and had lots of good conversations. But I'm really happy to connect this piece of the trail for residents across the city and the region who use this trail network to get around the city. So thanks to the staff for all of your hard work on this, and to residents for advocating and reaching out. And we're making a decision that is not everyone's going to be happy with, but it's the right decision. Thank you.
Councillor Henry, I'm happy to second the motion and also vote in favor.
This is Councillor Bonnecore. I vote in favour.
Councillor Denver, in favor.
Councillor Bodley, in favor.
Councillor Reed, in favor. Councillor Freeman, in favor.
And there is in favor too, that carries unanimously. much for this, Gavin and Dan and the rest of the team. As the council mentioned, great connectivity from Main Street to our trail. And closure part of and renaming of Copper Drive, well, that's not long ago. Report prepared for us by Natalie Hardacre, change of name. Do we have any questions on that? And we're waiting. I know Natalie's on the line, or maybe Joel. What's the difference between a Copper Drive and Copper Street?
Good afternoon. It's Natalie Hardacre here. I'm just checking to see that you can hear me.
We can hear you well, Natalie. Go ahead.
Great. So just to provide a bit of history here, the bylaw that created Copper Drive was established as Copper Drive, and after that bylaw came into full force and effect, we have been referring to it as Copper Street, and it's been historically referred to as Copper Street, even identified as such on Google Maps. So this bylaw is simply to change the name from Drive to Street, which would reflect what we are actually referring to the street as. The only document which really refers to it as Copper Drive is that name bylaw.
Excellent. Okay, got it, Natalie. I just wondered if there's some sort of differential, but this is more clear. I will go to the ward councillor to see if he will consider this change.
I'll gladly consider it. I never liked that name anyways. I'll move it and vote in favor.
Councillor Wreath, I'll second that and vote in favor. Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Well, so long Copper Drive and hello Copper Street. The mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Natalie, for that cleanup. Item G, the Rogers Street Park funding request prepared first by Daniel Waters. And there's a recommendation here. Does anybody have any questions on this item? And if not, I'll be going to the ward council. And I do not see any ward councillors, so please go ahead.
So this is Councillor Bonagor. I'm happy to move the motion and will vote in favour. This park is going to plug a hole in an underserved part of the Mariana neighbourhood, so I'm very excited to get this puppy going.
It's Councillor Hanmer. I'm happy to second the motion, and I too will vote in favor.
Councillor Bodley votes in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor. Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. There we go. A new park coming to Rogers Street in that development. That would be wonderful. Thank you very much, Daniel and team. Item H, sidewalks, snow service level consideration. Report prepared for us by an extensive team of Shane Turner, Christine Keeler, Jeff Wilcox, Child, and we're just going to have no presentation, but just an introductory comments by Shane Turner, our head of municipal enforcement services. Please go ahead, Shane.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I'll just make a few brief comments specifically related to the enforcement program and remind council that Jeff Silcox Childs and Christine Keeler are available as well for their pieces of the report. What we've seen in the last several years with regard to our sidewalk snow enforcement program is that we're becoming increasingly challenged in providing adequate response times and resolution times to deal with this neighborhood safety issue. Our current complement is made up of 2 officers. Each officer is seconded for a 3-month period, one from December to February, one from January to March. So you actually see that there's only 2 months in the wintertime that we have 2 officers, and we're we're seeing an increase in the challenges in terms of being able to provide a service that we think contributes to neighborhood safety. So what we're doing, based on input from staff and taking a look at our statistics over the last few years, we're proposing a third officer to be added to the complement, as well as increasing the coverage provided by the two existing positions, so that we would, as opposed to having two officers, we would have 3 officers for a 4-month period. Our plan is to review the location of the complaints that we receive across the city, map them out, and establish 3 zones with a dedicated officer for each zone. The incremental budget impact of this program, increase I should say, is $32,500, and it's proposed that we take it from the Winter Control Reserve, which is the reason why the issue is before council today, requiring council approval. As we go forward, this is a pilot that we're suggesting for 2 years prior to the 2023 budget cycle. And what we're looking at in terms of trying to measure the effectiveness is response times and hoping that we have fast responses to the complaints that come in, as well as reducing the amount of time it takes for the sidewalk problem to resolve, whether it be from voluntary compliance with the property owner or having a city contractor clear the sidewalks. So those are my comments. I will say that based on some discussions that took place after the report was made public, Councillor Henry had a discussion with staff, and based on that discussion, we're recommending that we remove recommendation number 4 at this time, and Councillor Henry has prepared an additional recommendation that he would like to provide when it's his opportunity to provide comments, and I know that that information was circulated to members of council over the weekend. So, Mayor Jaworski, that wraps up my comments.
Thank you very much, Shane. Yes, I'll go to Councillor Henry at the right time. I have a comment coming up from Councillor Wreath. I do have a question though myself regarding municipal enforcement services. I think that as an enterprise, in other words, self-funding enterprise, yes, in this case we're going to the reserve, and I think it's probably because of the comment that you mentioned, the community benefit, and maybe just walk us through the process of you get a complaint. But does the person get a fine, or does they get some education, and eventually if, say, it's an absentee landlord and they refuse to do anything about it, do we fine them, or do we just charge them for to clean up? Maybe just walk us through that process.
Certainly, Mayor Jaworski. The first step in the process, obviously, is responding to the complaint. That officer will look at the complaint address as well as adjacent addresses as well, obviously, to ensure safety and accessibility throughout the neighborhood. If there is a situation of non-compliance, then a notice is issued and left at the door of the property with a deadline to have the snow or ice cleared, I should say. And that typical time for compliance is 24 hours. Then the officer will go back after the 24-hour period, as soon as possible after the 24-hour period, and that becomes one of our is one of our challenges in terms of getting back in a short period of time based on all the complaints we receive. But the officer will go back. If the situation is still non-compliance, then we contact a contractor that is hired by the city and is dedicated to do these cleanups. They will remove the ice and snow from the sidewalk. The property owner is charged the actual cost of the cleanup as well as an administration fee for the officer's involvement and standby. So we don't issue fines per se, and we don't take people to court because we're focusing on compliance as quickly as possible.
Excellent, Shane. That really helps clear things up. I'm going to go to Councillor Wreath, since she's first up with her hand, but then I have Councillor Waterloo, Botley, and Hanner. Please go ahead, Councillor Wreath.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, thank you. It's amazing the number of emails we've had since this report came out, but and I get it. But I guess this is really not a comment, it's kind of a question. I know we have this home support program for seniors that the city runs, but I was wondering if this could be something too that we could you run through our neighborhood associations and our neighborhood groups. I mean, you know, just kind of helping each other out. And I know that happens on our street. You know, a couple people have snow blowers, so, you know, they'll come by and blow up the sidewalk for, you know, the neighbors around them. But I just think there's a way that we could do this as a community where, you know, using what we already have, our strong neighborhood associations and groups to get the word out to, you know, maybe to help each other out. Maybe that could be something that we could focus on through communications and the neighborhood team. Yes.
Thank you. So I might see if either Commissioner Dykstra or Tony Aroli have any commentary on the communication aspect of that.
Mayor, this is Commissioner Dykstra. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so great point Councillor Beef makes, and this is one that we've emphasized and think is very valid, is community support for one another. It's been that showing, back and lean and look after that neighbor who is out there who may not be as up to get that sidewalk shoveled. So yes, we can take that one away and look to see how we continue that message and leverage our neighborhood newsletter, our shout-outs through our neighborhood groups, and work with our neighborhood team to support that messaging for this season.
Thank you, Mark. I will go to Councillor Waterloo, and Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. I have a few questions here, and it might be for a few of the staff, but let me just start with the update to the Transportation Master Plan. Am I correct in recalling forward some guidance in terms of snow clearing of sidewalks, one way or the other? Is that correct?
I think they'll be for Christine.
Sorry, Mayor, had a problem unmuting there. That would be correct. We are looking at, as part of the TMP, how we're going to deal with maintenance, winter maintenance of sidewalks and multi-use trails.
That's great. Thanks, Michaela. Because we've been receiving at Council a number of letters advocating for city cleared sidewalks now, and I just wanted to reassure people that there is a discussion going on. That's not the decision we'll be making today by any means, but I want people to know that staff have been hearing them for a long time, Council hears them as well, and that it's not that we're not considering different options. It's just we're not at the point of making decisions yet. And having said that, whatever the TMP does bring forward, if there is some kind of city clearing in there, we're probably also going to need additional enforcement so people can actually get from their doorstep to the cleared sections if we end up doing that. So this gives us a chance to test options for enforcement. That takes me through a couple of other questions that have been raised. The first is really about windrows and the lumpy snow that's left behind by snowplows on the roads. At the corners and at pedestrian intersections, this can be a real menace, and anyone who's tried to go over them with an injury of some kind, or heaven forbid with a stroller, it can be pretty impossible. Ms. Kayla, I'm probably going to throw this one to you. Is there anything that we can do in our snow plowing to improve corner accessibility? Like, is it possible for plow drivers to drop their wing at corners? And what, I think that would make a great increase in accessibility, but, is it even possible? Is it something that's could be considered?
through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councilor Bonagor, it would be very difficult for an operator to lift the plow every time it came to a corner or a driveway or something like that. It would take us a lot longer to clean the roads if we were constantly having to stop, lift the blade, move forward, put it back down. So I'm not sure that would work for our operations. We would have to look at locations. Possibly in the uptown, we could partner with our friends in parks and maybe they could help in some of the high traffic locations for pedestrians. But it would be very difficult for the plows to maneuver that request.
And just to be clear, I was not talking about driveways. It was just at sidewalks, where the sidewalk meets in the intersection. Does that help at all?
It would still be problematic for all of the intersections that we have across the city. That's why I'm suggesting there are high traffic locations within the core. We could possibly look to our friends at parks with their smaller equipment to help out the windrow that we've left.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you taking that back as part of the discussion. That would be great. Another thing that is raised often in discussions about accessibility during winter is the clearing of bus stops. Correct me if I'm wrong, that's regional, is it not?
Yes, it is the Grand River Transit's responsibility to clear all of the bus stops, and I believe they have a contractor that does that for them.
Do we have any ideas of how this, are there any proposals on the table from the region or the Grand River Transit's contractor on how this can be done better and on how we can better coordinate to make sure that bus stops are accessible?
I might take that as a regional council. I do know there's discussions on it all the time, as you may know. Last regional council, we were still doing it on their behalf, and they switched to a contractor. Some of those worked out, some not so much. But yeah, what I'll do is ask for an update from transportation team from the region to get something out to our council for information.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much, Mayor and Regional Councillor. And my final question touches on what Councillor Wreath was just talking about, that snow removal assistance program. In your report, you mentioned that it fills up quite quickly, and there are always people who need it. Is this something that we at Council should be looking to expand?
Sorry, Councilor Bonagor, and through you, Mayor Jaworski. That's something that I'll take back and discuss with Jim Bowman. The program essentially is administered out of Mr. Bowman's office. So I will take that back and we'll provide an update to Council.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Watley.
Thank you. Chair Mayor Jaworski. I'm going to break this out into two parts of the conversation, the enforcement piece and the conversation about the city clearing sidewalks. So through Mayor Jaworski to Shane, and you highlighted sort of three-step process there. Step one, the notice is issued with a deadline, and then step two, the contractor is contacted if we don't see compliance within 24 hours. And your hope is that this sort of pilot that we're initiating is going to increase the number of those that we get to within shortly after that 24-hour period, is what I heard. Is that where the delay tends to be? That we are struggling to get out there in a reasonable time after the 24-hour sort of grace period there? Or is the time period really after that when we have to contact the contractor and how much time it takes for the contractor to come out and clear the sidewalk? Do we anticipate, can you comment on that? Do we anticipate any concerns or issues related to the contractor? As Mayor Jaworski said, at the regional level, some are good, some are bad.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley. Excuse me, the timeframes that we're hoping to reduce are actually, there's two pieces to it. One is the initial response. Typically speaking, we respond to complaints 24 hours after a snowfall. However, if we have a large snowfall and a large influx of complaints, then the challenge is getting to them all within that shortly after that 24-hour period. So there's a bit of a delay there at times, depending on weather conditions. And then the second piece, as you noted, is the delay in getting out and doing re-inspections while having to also do initial inspections. The piece about the contract, we've actually been more successful in the last couple of years by being very clear in terms of the service level agreements that we have in place with the contractors. So there is a delay there. There can be a delay there at times. But what we're focusing on is getting a contractor that will provide a guarantee to the city that they will, he or she will provide dedicated resources, as opposed to doing city clearing along with all the rest of their contracts that they have in place. So that can be a delay, but I believe over the last couple of years, and we're looking again this year to improve that time frame.
Excellent. I would anticipate that we would probably need to be, or that we, given the reduction in time frame for us to get out there for re-inspection, that we're probably going to need that contractor more frequently. And so focusing on getting some sort of guarantee from them or some sort of priority from them, I think that would be very valuable to ensure the success of the pilot. The second question I have for you, Mr. Turner, is around I just been playing with this in my head, and maybe if you can figure it for me or decipher the inane ramblings that go on in my brain. So we're hiring 3 officers for 4-month windows. Is there, obviously it would have been determined at some point in time that November and March are lower sort of time windows for this. And that were probably, based on my thoughts, I guess, going to be over-indexed with enforcement officers in November and March due to this. And I'm curious if there was any conversation or thought given to, it's actually more important for right, and that's going to lead to less complaints down the line. Is there any thought given to hiring more people up front and really being proactive in that, the first few snowfalls in December and January, I guess? There's maybe some thoughts on what went into the decision to time people the way that you've recommended.
Through Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bodley, the time frames we have, just for clarification, we don't have officers seconded for the month of November, so it's December to the end of March. And
sorry, my apologies for that. Correct, yeah, December.
And as we get into March, one of the things that we have the ability to do, since we have officers, in some cases the officers that we have are seconded from our existing part-time officer pool, we have the ability, if we have a very mild March, and we don't require as much enforcement, we do have the ability to second them or re-second them back into, if that's the right language, back into their role as compliance officers. So if there are existing employees that are seconded, we have that ability, and typically 1 or 2 have been seconded employees, existing employees in previous years. There are times when we hire a new officer, just a seasonal officer. But so we do have some flexibility in terms of the month of March. In terms of doing increased enforcement for the first couple of months, I'll be honest in saying I haven't really considered that. My thought process has been that typically in December, January, and February we see snow. The challenge that we have in March is as the temperatures get warmer during the day and then cold at night, we have that freeze-thaw cycle. So we have more of an ice problem in March than perhaps a snow problem. And so that's why we've looked at needing to take the program right out into March. The challenge, of course, is that if you've got a buildup of ice over a period of time without snow, people sort of lose track of the fact that their sidewalks may be icy because they don't have that visual reminder of a snowfall that says we need to get onto our sidewalks. So the month of March presents its own challenges. However, I think your point is a good one, and that's something that we could build into the review process as we review the first phase of this program.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. And then my last question for you before I go on to the city clearing questions is around repeat offenders. Is there anything in this pilot project or that addresses the unfortunate folks who make the decision not to do this on a repeated basis? Or do you have any sort of commentary around the ongoing approach related to repeat offenders?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the repeat offender issue is obviously something that we see from time to time. We have our usual customers. What we're doing with the repeat offenders now is foregoing the warning phase. So if we're back to a property for a second time after they've been in non-compliance, we have the ability to go right to sending it to a contractor as opposed to going through the process of issuing another warning.
Excellent, and that's new, something we're doing this year?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, that's something that we actually started doing last year as we sort of modified the program near the middle to the second half of the program last year. But by that time we hadn't had a lot of experience. We didn't have a lot of experience with it as the number of complaints were reduced come March.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, Mr. Turner. Mayor Jaworski, if it's okay for me to ask my questions related to city clearing, I am cognizant that I'm monopolizing the time here, or I could pass it along and come back to me.
No, keep going. We'll get through this, and then we'll go ahead. Please keep going.
Thank you for your patience, Mayor Jaworski. So through you, one of the comments that's in the report that we received is around the theoretical cost of approximately $3 million annually for city snow removal. And there's a comment that at this time staff is not recommending this, in part related to environmental impacts, which I'm interested in having that conversation at a later date. It is very interesting. But the second was around response times and not being able to achieve the desired goals. I'm wondering if somebody on the snow clearing side could speak to how we're able to get it right, or maybe we don't get it right, on the 162.42 kilometers that are stated in the report that we do get to bare pavement within 24 to 48 hours. What makes that different from the rollout or theoretical rollout to all 701 kilometers of sidewalks and trails throughout the city?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jack, can you hear me okay?
You're loud and clear. Well, you're clear, not so loud.
Okay, excellent. To you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, just to answer your question. With regard to response times, the ability of city staff to respond to any snow event is based on the number of staff, number of equipment. The ability to respond to clearing sidewalks citywide is obviously a much greater task, and it would take staff time to get to all locations. It would also take staff time to start a route and finish a route. So the point I'm trying to make is a resident with a sidewalk in front of their home or or a property owner with a sidewalk has the ability to go out immediately after a snowfall and to clear that section quickly. Whereas city staff would take up to 24 or 48 hours to get there. Within that time period, people will have walked there, cars will have gone by. It makes it much more difficult to remove that snow. In addition, homeowners have the ability to respond very quickly to changes in weather. So when they get those sunny day opportunities when it's still cold, but the sun is out and can melt quickly, a homeowner or a property owner has the ability to respond very fast in front of their property. Whereas city staff don't necessarily have that ability to get to all places at the same time. So that's what that's referring to. It's that lag in time.
Thank you for that clarification. Just for further clarification, if I may, through Mayor Jaworski to Jeff. So your suggestion is not necessarily that we couldn't, if we were to take this on fully, get to all sidewalks within 24 to 48 hours. Your commentary is simply that the resident is likely being able to get to it much faster.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's absolutely correct. And for us, we only have so many tools in our toolbox. And unfortunately, salt is one of those tools. For us to get there and to achieve that bare pavement service level, we will have to rely more heavily on salt usage, whereas a homeowner can really use Mother Nature to the best ability to get rid of that material without the addition of salt, or with very, very minimal.
I appreciate that commentary, and thank you very much for that. And I look forward to sort of seeing where things go on this conversation. I guess just broadly speaking, if I may make a comment here, in my 2 years only on council, I don't get very much in the way of complaints from residents on streets that are cleared by the city. Laurelwood, for example, I don't really get very much in the way of complaints on Laurelwood. Laurel Gate, which is completely fronted by private homeowners, that's a street that I often get complaints on. And so I think there's certainly in the short term, in the very short term window, I think you are correct, Jeff. Homeowners are broadly going to be able to get to their property much, much faster than we would be able to. But the issue really persists on a mid to long-term basis where the snow is packed down and it becomes ice and things like that, where we really just don't run into those concerns on the streets that we are clearing, and we do run into those on private properties. And I want to make the point here, I did this calculation, 162.42 kilometers is what we clear. And from an earlier report, there are 547 kilometers of sidewalks and 154 kilometers of trails in the city of Waterloo. So when, I don't know, it just kind of bugs me. When people are talking about the city clearing sidewalks and trails, the city already clears sidewalks and trails. In fact, by my calculations, 23%, nearly 1/4 of sidewalks and trails in the city are cleared by the city of Waterloo. So what we're talking about when we're engaging in this discussion or debate is not really a conversation around whether we should do it. It's around whether we should do more. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm very much looking forward to where the transportation master plan comes out on this, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all for answering that question.
Thank you, Councillor Bosley. Over to Councillor Henry.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Through you, a lot of my questions have already been raised by Councillor Bonnemoore and Bodley. Thank you to both of you for raising those. As I've listened, though, to the responses, and it's made me think even more just how we're looking at this particular issue. It certainly is one that rises its head every year, and part of me feels that we're looking at just one piece of it by looking at enforcement at this stage. And I'm wondering if we really need to be looking at it in a broader fashion where it takes into account really 5 aspects. And one for sure is enforcement. But I think before we get to that point, we've got to look at the other 4. How much are we investing in the assistance program that's available for those residents who are not able to clear their own properties, have the desire to, but are not able to do that? What's the coordination with the region, as we talked about before, specifically around bus stops, LRT stops, and where there's crossovers? And the longer-term plan on stormwater removal through the transportation and master plan, I'm thinking we may be putting a lot of emphasis on it, but to me, that will pull the whole thing together. And then the last piece that is important for us to consider is also the communication or the partnerships, participations with our neighborhood associations and home associations to look at what can be done in a neighborhood. I'm struggling a bit with just why are we focusing right now on one component of it when a couple of the other pieces may make a difference or a change in exactly what we might need around enforcement. So I guess long way around, I will ask a question of Mr. Turner. And you've been involved in some of the other aspects that I'm suggesting be part of our holistic approach to snow removal and ice removal. In requesting the additional enforcement officers this time around, what consideration has been given to the other aspects of what would be a comprehensive program?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, the other components would include the coverage for the support for homeowners through the seniors program. We also are looking at increasing our messaging to neighborhoods through the neighborhood strategy. And the other piece of it is just having a robust communications plan. As a reminder, our communications plan is focused, or is coordinated, I should say, with the city of Kitchener. So I'm not sure that I'm answering your question directly, Councillor Hammer, and perhaps the other directors could offer comments if they wish. I would point out that this program, or this enforcement request that we're making at this time is a pilot. It is not binding the city to future coverage. And so the piece around the enforcement, our hope is issuing more notices, getting to these issues sooner will help drive the messaging home. And so that enforcement becomes more of a self-policing approach in the neighborhoods. And I apologize, I may not have hit all the points that you're speaking of, so please let me know if you need further clarification.
No, thank you. I think you have wrapped it around. What was striking for me is that we were focusing only on the enforcement component right now when, in my mind, the other pieces, if they're not in place and given equal importance, or equal prominence, then enforcement doesn't achieve the goals that you are wanting it to achieve. So if coupled with a greater emphasis on the assistance program that's available, the coordination that we're doing with the region on some of the hotspots, so to speak, and the communication efforts, and that enforcement become a component of that, then that does start to get us moving forward. I too look forward to our further conversation at another time on the Transportation Master Plan, which will give us an opportunity to debate further the question about how much more in terms of snow removal we as a city may be able to do. I agree with Councillor Bodley that our communication should be not that we're not doing anything right now. We are. The question really is, what more can we do or ought we be able to do? So, Mr. Turner, you have answered my question. Thank you. And that's it from you, Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, it's Chuck again. If I could add to that, to the councillor, on a couple of points. A lot of our plan is very contingent on getting that transportation master plan through, and then after transportation will initiate their priority routing exercise. So a lot of what we need to do is really contingent on that happening first. And if I can even reply back to a previous report that Gavin did great on McKay Crescent, that would be included in that exercise. So that would be part of that exercise prior to the next budget. So a lot of the work is contingent on that. The other comment I wanted to make was on home support services, that program. In discussions with Jim earlier, one of the questions I had was, as everyone else has indicated, can we add money to that program and support more? The challenge there, the program is reliant on essentially paid volunteers to be matched with people who are looking for that service. And the challenge is really getting enough people interested. And it's not just people, it could be small business coming and being interested in participating in that program. So it's not adding additional monies to the program might not achieve the result that you're looking for. Definitely communications, adding money to communications and getting the word out there more, and certainly through the neighborhoods, I think that's more likely to achieve the result. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for that extra information. I just know we have a lot more questions on it, a lot more council meetings to go to if we're not, won't be taking a break today. Next up, I have Councilor Freeman.
Yeah, hi, it's Councillor Freeman with a chorus of dogs in the background. My apologies. Question was kind of building on some of the things that Councillor Wreath and had mentioned around neighborhoods. Last year, the City of Kitchener ran a program where they made financial resources available to purchase some snow blowers for some neighborhood associations so that they could build out a bit of a volunteer base within their community to go out and help clear snow. And I'd like to know whether or not that's something staff could take away and see whether we could do this year too. We do have monies that we've made available through our neighborhood programs, and I think that could be a really interesting opportunity.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, it's definitely something we can take back. The feedback I've gotten from Kitchener to date on the program, it was met with, I would say, limited success. Certainly something we can explore further.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman. Next up is that Councilor Henry. I think that's it. So does anybody have any questions before Councilor Henry? I think he's last.
I have one, it's Jen.
Oh, sorry, Jen, you go ahead.
That's okay. Thanks, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just have two questions. One is related to what you were just talking about, Jeff, about not being sure if there's like the volunteers and if it's easy to match or whatever. So I remember on Twitter that for at least a part in my ward and somewhere else that like everyone who needed somebody to shovel was matched really quickly. So that made me wonder, and I haven't actually put out the question yet, are there extra volunteers that wanted to volunteer but people didn't need it or hadn't reached out for it? So if there are extra volunteers, might we be wanting to say there are? So if there is anybody else who needs the program and hasn't, that could be part of the communication strategy? Or was it the other way around that there weren't enough volunteers? But I think they were matched. So just curious for more context around that program and if there are still volunteers out there who would want to be, because it was like really quick that they got matched, I think.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the challenge is lack of volunteers, and they're not really volunteers; they're paid volunteers. So the challenge has been our volunteer base doesn't match our needs, and we tend to have that program filled by the end of November and a wait list.
Oh, okay, so maybe I just totally misread. I thought I thought everyone had been matched this year. Did that happen this year, and that's just not typical?
I think the question is, what does by November mean? By November 30th or by November 2nd today? Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. And again, I don't run the program, so I'll confirm with Jim and get the numbers back to you. My understanding is by the end of November, the program is typically matched out, and there are not enough volunteers to be matched to those who need it.
Okay, got it. Thanks. And then my second question is, I mean, obviously I'm quite keen on building towards doing as much sidewalk clearing as we can, and I also realize the challenge is doing it well, and you don't want to do it if it's not done well, otherwise it's going to make everyone more frustrated. So I don't think that's the goal, but I think the more and the better routes where this is being done, the better. And I think I've been clear about that, so I don't want to harp on that, but I am curious about the prioritization of routes that will happen after the active transportation, the transportation master plan comes forward. And one of the things that I think we're told, and I think that makes sense, is our weather patterns are so all over the place that this is part of why the program, like why it's easier to have somebody just come out of their house if they can to shovel, and like that makes a lot of sense to me, so I get that. At the same time, I think I personally don't have a good enough understanding of if there are other places with similar weather patterns that are doing this, and I think someone was talking about Allura or Elmira, and it wasn't really working really well there, but I'm curious if part of the transportation master plan or the prioritization of routes, if some of what you'll be doing is bringing back to council some exemplars of places that are doing this and what is working, because I mean, I really would love to build to having the city clear sidewalks over time, because I think what I'm hearing is, you know, people pay anyhow when they can't do it for those who can. So for many people, they're sacrificing finances to do that service so that they can work and get and get their kids from school and not have to do so much housework. But if they just had to pay $30 extra or however many extra dollars in taxes, then it would be a good trade-off. Of course, that's not possible for everyone. So I guess what I really, really want to understand is, are there places that can do it with these weather patterns? And then sort of how can we work towards that? So will those exemplars be, or the places where it's failed, will that be part of what you bring back with the prioritization of routes?
To you, Mr. Mayor, and Christine, if you want to jump in as well, by all means. I would say, yes, we would definitely include some comparators. We're well aware of other municipalities that don't and other municipalities that do, and there's pros and cons in each area, and we can bring those back within the final report in probably Q4 of next year.
Okay, great, thank you. And also appreciate that places like McKay Crescent and McKay Crescent will be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last up is Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for asking almost all of the questions I could possibly think of about sidewalks and snow today. So the one I've got left is just an item of clarification on that, one paragraph that spoke about estimating a budget requirement for the city taking on the balance of sidewalks and trails in the city that estimated $3 million. I was just wondering if folks could confirm what service standard that was to. I assume it was to the provincial standard of only once we see 8 centimeters of snow.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, if I can jump in there. Our service level actually exceeds the minimum maintenance level already. So what we were proposing was our consistent service level. So above and beyond that 8 centimeter criteria.
I think that's helpful. So as we, I would flag for council the recommendation number 5 reads to me like what Chris Kaler described, which is after the TMP, that we asked staff to do a kind of some process that would look at our winter maintenance practices for active transportation that includes community and stakeholder engagement input. Certainly that would be a precursor to making a significant decision around budgets. And so that's embedded in the thing that we'll be asked to approve today. So council is providing that direction. So that's something else that we can let residents know who are asking us to do more today, is that what we are doing today is directing that such a process begin as soon as we've got the policy document basis to do it, and that's coming up soon. So that's important. And I'd flag through this, I appreciate Jeff hearing that our service standard exceeds the provincial minimum maintenance standards at only starting at 8 centimeters. I do know from the Kitchener pilots, you had a neighborhood that saw the provincial standard and an urban neighborhood that saw a much better standard, and the difference in people's response to that and the cost of doing that were significantly different. And I think that's important to learn. We don't have to do the same things to learn the same things when they've happened just across Union. So you can get a sense of where public opinion moves when certain things happen. So I think that's useful fodder as we embark on a process next year to start that kind of engagement. So with that, I'll look at the motion itself. What I propose, moving is the motion as written, except instead of recommendation number 4, I would replace it with that council directs staff to report back to council prior to the end of 2022 with respect to the Municipal Enforcement Services staffing model changes, Environmental Parks Division's priority route adjustments based on the Active Transportation Master Plan implementation, and the outcome of the region's segregated bike lane pilot. So I move it in that way because from a budget share standpoint, I'm uncomfortable at this point in directing only one aspect of the broader conversation. Be direction that we would provide into the next budget cycle that's a couple of years away. This is an integrated, complex, and challenging issue that requires a lot of engagement and a lot of moving parts that council's discussed today. And so it would be prudent for us to have those pieces together before providing further direction, to be able to do that comprehensively rather than piece by piece. So that's why I'm proposing to replace recommendation 4 with what's printed to what I just read out, and that was something that I did in consultation with staff, and is something that is a direction that they're happy to support. So that's the motion I'm moving, and I'm happy to vote in favor.
So move that amendment, and I'll look to word please.
This is Councillor Bonagor. I will second the amended motion and vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, I will vote in favor of the amended motion.
Councillor Wilding is in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
And I guess it's over to me. I'm in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thanks very much to the team. A lot of community interest in this one, as we all know. And look forward to any updates along the line. I did think Councillor Wilding had a very interesting point about making sure that we are on this as soon as we can, so that we set the tone for the remainder of the winter. That's a very interesting area, very good catch. We are now moving to item J. Item J, Kaufman Flat Maintenance Agreement Renewal, a report prepared for us by Liz Williams, and I'm guessing you're probably having questions on this, so I'm going to look for the word counselor. Take it.
This is Councillor Freeman. I move the motion as printed. Councillor Bassick. I seconded and I vote in favor.
Oh, Councillor Freeman, did you vote for it?
Sorry, yes, I vote in favor. Thank you.
Okay, good. And let's go to Councillor Bonagor. Councillor Henry, just off for a second.
This is Councillor Bonagor. I vote in favour.
Councillor Hanmer, in favor.
All in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor.
And I'll go back to Councillor Henry.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Mayor in favor too. That carries unanimously. Thank you very much for this report, Lou. Item K, proposed demolition of residential dwelling 292 Waterloo Drive, Grand River Conservation Authority.
go ahead. I think that's right?
Technically, it's on the north side. I don't know if it's Councillor Wreath or not, but nevertheless, I will move the motion and vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Wreath, second motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
The mayor in favor too, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Dominic, for bringing this to our attention. Item L, regional council composition. What this is, we considered this several months ago. We gave our input, and now that we've given our input, regional council has come up with the recommendation. We now need to affirm essentially our original input and on the regional council composition. Does anyone have any questions on that? Seeing none, I might go to Councillor Wreath. I haven't had a chance to go to you for a little bit of a while, I don't think. So I'll go to Councillor Wreath to consider this.
Thank you, Jaworski. Councillor Wreath here. I move the motion and I vote in favor.
Councillor Freeman, I second the motion and also vote in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Donnelly in favor.
And the mayor in favor too, that carries unanimously. Our input going back to regional council, this region. Item M, a report prepared for us by Tim Anderson, the Game Board of Directors, for a staff position, or somebody to apply from staff. And we thought we had a wonderful idea in our own Julie Scott. And Tim, is there anything you want to say about this? I think it's clear on what we want to do.
Yes, Mayor, thanks. No, just quickly, AMO's got a notice out to all the member municipalities in the province that they've got 2 vacancies, one for the large urban caucus and one for the rural caucus. And as Mayor, you noted, we think Julie Scott would be an exemplary candidate. And as part of the process, we need a council motion of support, so she put in submission by the end of November. And we're optimistic she'll be a wonderful candidate and a great representative for Waterloo and for the province of Ontario.
Excellent. I think so too. And so does Councillor Bassick, who reached out to me to ask if she could move it.
Yes. Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. Julie has been a huge help to me on so many things, and I've often turned to Julie for guidance. She has a view of the whole city and compassion and oriented towards fairness and justice, and so I also believe she is an exemplary candidate, and I really am happy to move this motion and vote in favor.
And I did not realize that Councillor Freeman had independently reached out. I missed that. And so go to Councillor Freeman, I'm sure we'll do it second again.
Having spent a lot of time on the AMO Board of Directors, I know that Julie will be an asset as a staff person to the large urban caucus. And I'm happy to second the motion and vote in favor.
Councillor Henry, I'm in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favour, and go Julie.
Councillor Hanmer also in favor. Julie, thank you for putting your name forward.
Councillor Donnelly is in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too. That carries unanimously. I'll look at her right now and say, go Julie. Have a good time. She's one of her best days ever, she said. Just keeps going, getting better all the time. Okay, excellent. That carries unanimously. Thank you all for that. Just a moment while I sort some papers here. Just a note to anybody who is, anyway, to everybody who's watching on YouTube, there's a deferred item, the official plan amendment 26 and zone change application Z1903 will not be considered today. It's the Killen West Mountain Plaza, West Mountain Road and Herb Street application has been deferred to a later date and will not be considered by council today, November 2nd, 2020. We'll be reading that one. Formal. Okay. This is an informal public meeting to consider item 11A, zone change application Z2003, 145 Columbia Waterloo Court at 145 Columbia Street West. There will be no decisions made today. Council and the public are seeing this application for the first time. Council is looking for feedback from interested parties with respect to this application. Today's comments will be taken into consideration in developing a staff position on this application, and a staff report will be considered by council during a formal public meeting at a future time. All property owners within 120 meters of the subject land, and anyone who requests further notice of this application will receive notice of the formal public meeting. Anybody who wants further notice of this application, including the formal public meeting and passes the next bylaw, to contact the planner for the city, Joel Cotter, at 519-747-8543, or joel.cotter@waterloo.ca, that's spelled JOEL.COTTER@waterloo.ca. Planner Joel Cotter will now provide a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and to the public listening. This is the informal public meeting for zoning bylaw amendment Z20-03 for the property at 145 Columbia Street West. And the applicant is 145 Columbia Waterloo Court. Next slide, please. So this is just the location of the property. It is the gray property is 145 Columbia. And it is the second phase, if you will, of the Icon development that was originally constructed at 330 Phillip. So it is to the southeast of the Phillip and Columbia intersection. Next slide, please. So again, the original development, the Icon development, shown in the rendering on the slide, is at 330 Phillip Street. That was the initial construction. The lands at 330 Phillip are fully developed at this point in time. The remaining lands are about 0.46 acres, and they are 145 Columbia Street as municipal address. They remain as a standalone property, but are tied to 330 Phillip Street with respect to access and services and underground parking. There was a site plan that was approved for 145 Columbia Street for an existing development, and the building permit has been obtained for that project in 2020, and the development is actively under construction. So while the developer is constructing or just commencing construction of the development, they've submitted this zone change application to seek some additional relief from the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The official plan for 145 Columbia is mixed-use, high-density residential. It's 25 stories within the Northdale planning framework. The specific provision areas, 45, which relates to Northdale, and 50, which is specific to this property, set up certain requirements, including the density, the maximum density at the bottom of the screen of 940 bedrooms per hectare, subject to a section 37, or what's commonly referred to as a bonusing agreement under the Planning Act. It is within a major node and within the University of Waterloo Station area, tied to the ION LRT. There is a requirement for a high standard of urban design in this area. Slide, please. The zoning bylaw for the property is residential Northdale 25, RN 25. There is existing site-specific zoning on the property already that restricts the height of the front tower closest to Columbia Street to 40 meters and restricts the building height for the rear tower to 55 meters and establishes a maximum density of 940 bedrooms per hectare on both 145 Columbia and 330 Phillips Street combined. And again, the requirements for the Section 37 are centered in that site-specific bylaw being provision of underground parking, private art, public realm, enhanced landscaping, and a minimum LEED Silver certification for the building. Prior to obtaining site plan approval and a building permit for the current development that's under construction, the owner did obtain a variance in 2019 to increase the building height from 40 for the front tower to 47, and for the rear tower from 55 to 61.5 to allow a 15-story and 20-story tower to be constructed on the property. So the application before council seeks further height increases, which would be on the scope of the minor variance. Next slide, please. So the existing approvals, just for council's awareness, for phase one, which was the Icon at 330 Phillip, as it is constructed and occupied at 623 units, 866 bedrooms with 1,000 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor. And 145 Columbia, the current property, is under construction. Currently, the approvals are for 435 units, 445 bedrooms, and 162 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor. So combined that 330 and 145 equal, at this point, 872 bedrooms per hectare. Next slide, please. So the application before council is Z2003, and it seeks to increase the front tower from sort of 47 meters or 15 stories to 61.5 meters or 20 stories. For the rear tower, from 61.5 meters to 20 stories to 70 meters and 23 stories. So an increase of a few stories on each tower, along with some site-specific amendments related to parking and potentially other performance regulations as necessary to implement proposed development. The parking for the property, which currently sits at 390 parking spaces for both the 330 Phillip and 145 Columbia Street property, is sufficient to meet the overall parking requirements of both development, but it was based on the assumption that the properties would merge, and because the properties remain as standalone parcels, technically there is a need for relief related to the parking that's on the property at 145. The purpose of the application with the increase in height is to more efficiently use the lands by adding an additional 100 additional units to the property, all one-bedroom units. And that would allow the developer to achieve, through both the Icon development and 145, a total of 940 bedrooms per hectare, or based on the existing land area, 1,411 bedrooms. So the issues before staff for consideration are the building height, which is requested, the issues tied to community benefits and parking, and the issue with respect to community benefits is that notwithstanding the 4 permissions that were established through the earlier site-specific zoning, in 2017, through the stationary planning board, the council approved the provision of underground parking was removed from the list of eligible bonusing items. So as there's a current zoning application in front of the city, and because in 2017 council removed underground parking, that element needs to be considered through the zoning amendment. Staff will do that as part of the issues resolution process. Next slide, please. So here's a rendering of the proposed developments. The heights proposed, it's looking from the opposite side or the north side of Columbia, looking in a southeast direction, so the front of the building CA, just type in zone changes and look for 145 Columbia Street. The information is there. Staff will evaluate these plans and studies as part of our review of the application. Next slide, please. And where we're at in the process, the application has been submitted. We've initiated an agency circulation and are working our way through that. We're now at the informal public meeting stage. Coming forward, we will work through issues resolution, prepare a staff report, and present it to council at a formal public meeting. So we're in the first 1/3 of the process. Next slide, please. Thank you. That concludes the presentation. If there's any questions of council, I'd be happy to answer.
Excellent, Joel. Does any councilor have any questions for staff? Please remember this is an informal public meeting and only questions and clarifications may be asked. Council members should not express opinions at this point. I will note that we do have a delegation coming up here. And for our viewers, if you would like to speak this meeting, please call the clerk's office now at 519-747-8705. That's 519-747-8705 to register as a delegation. Next, first up, I have Councillor Henry, then Councillor Green. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Joel. Thank you for the presentation. It's good to see you getting your hands dirty in the planning department by being the active planner on file. That's always useful for everybody to see that the director can get into the weeds with everybody else from time to time. Two questions. One, I know that there must be an approved site plan for 145 Columbia, given the construction work that is progressing. Given the shared parking issue that requires resolution because the sites will remain separate, is that site plan something that the group will be looking at or needs to be looked at to make sure that there is safe connectivity from one parcel to the parking on the other parcel, given these are shared?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Henry, great question. You're correct, site plan approval was granted in July of 2020. The site plan was designed with the ultimate proposal or the application from council, assuming that it was in force and effect. The site plan was designed on that basis. So even though the applicant is proposing additional height and seeking an additional 100 units, they designed the building with the structural components and the parking and all the amenities as if the additional 100 units were included in the design. So yes, it's the final density that they work towards and design their collective projects from that overall number at 330 Phillip and 145 Columbia. The challenge is, as I said, the properties were originally contemplated to merge. We have a regulation in our zoning bylaw that requires parking to be satisfied on the same lot for which it's generated. So it's not that there's not insufficient parking to meet the demands of the overall development, it's just it's not located on the lot within which it's generated. And certainly through 330 Phillip Street, the work that was done on that, the easements for access and shared facilities were secured through that development to service this second phase, if you will, at 145 Columbia.
Thank you, Joel. One further question from me. If you've highlighted some changes to the official plan that affect the nature of what we can contemplate for bonusing versus what had been contemplated for the existing agreement. I'm wondering if that means that staff are proposing to use our current process in terms of identifying uplift value and shared value as part of that issue resolution. Knowing it's not just the OP that's changed, their practices have been updated as well with experience.
Through your Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Henry, certainly it's a matter under discussion. We've not come across this type of a scenario, to be honest, where the bonusing framework had been pre-established and then the policy framework had changed. So hence partly why I'm involved and then there's some complicated considerations here through the process, but certainly we could potentially move towards an uplift value or look at other recent examples in the Northdale area that would give us a benchmark to work from. I think both would be acceptable in this particular situation, but ultimately we will review that in more detail as part of the issues resolution and then advance the path forward that we think makes the most sense and is most reasonable under these circumstances.
Thank you, Joel, and I'll simply sort of note as we do come to review that, and this comes back to a formal, I do know we had sort of a false start on a prior informal, I believe, on this site, or hold removal, where I made some comments in a public forum about looking at what was the effective density of phase one versus what was the stated density. There was certainly some creative architectural flourishes in terms of interior unit designs. And so if we are in a scenario under bonusing where we're looking at uplift value and the range that we consider for the share of the uplift value, that would be in the back of my mind in terms of understanding what share is appropriate for community benefits in how phase one came about, and some of the challenges that we can't resolve formally as planning matters, but are certainly within the realm that I'm interested in considering when we do the Section 37 update. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Councillor Henry. Councillor Freeman and Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, can you bring your presentation back up? I'm trying to find a summary of the comparison of what would be allowed now and what is being requested. And I'm trying to get like a sense of what that looks like more broadly in the context of the neighborhood, because there's other multi-residential properties nearby too, and I'm trying to remember what was their approved height, what was their density, and that kind of thing. Is there just one slide that has like a table that summarizes? I just pulled up the planning justification report, but I don't have time to obviously read it.
Yeah. Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Freeman, there is a slide, a few more slides into the presentation. Going, please, one more in there. One back for slide 7, please.
Okay.
So this is essentially the request, the front tower going from 15 stories to 20 stories, and the rear tower going from 20 stories to 23 stories. The effect of that is to add 100 additional units to the project, but essentially it's a height increase of the front and the rear tower as stated. The planning framework for this area is 25 stories, so the I-plan development built under that framework. The land to the north, or sorry, to the east, we've seen some preliminary concepts for, again, high-rise developments in that location as well. When this property originally came through in the 2013 timeframe, with the original site-specific phase one with ICON, there was a development concept that was advanced, and the zoning that was established for that site-specific was based on that development concept, which lowered the height requirements for the 145 property based on that specific design. Certainly over the years, the developer has reevaluated what could happen on 145 Columbia and has worked through the committee of adjustment to increase the height somewhat, and has secured a site plan application and building permit for that slightly modified increase in height for the development today, but they recognize that they are still working well below their uppermost density within zoning, and that's the level density they would like to achieve, which is the 940 megawatts per hectare. And to achieve that density, they're asking for this additional height permission from council to increase both towers and add that additional 100 units to the project, which gets them up to their maximum density. So they're trying to efficiently use their land and their property to the extent possible. And to do that, they
exactly the summary I was looking for, and also the context that 25 stories is what is in and around there. So thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councilor Freeman. Over to you, Councilor Baldwin.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski, to Mr. Cotter. I'm just curious about, I think this is the first time that I've come across this as councillor, about the minor variance process and how that process worked to get them from the original site-specific provisions, which were 40 meters and 55 meters respectively, to 47 and 61.5 meters. Well, can you maybe walk me through what that process looks like and when that took place?
Sure. The application was submitted in 2019. It's an application to the city's Committee of Adjustment, and the Committee of Adjustment under Section 45 of the Planning Act has authority to provide minor relief to the zoning bylaw. So in this case, the developers had looked at the original site-specific zoning that was applied to the property, which limited the height of the towers to lower heights. See if I can find the specific references. I think a little less than 15 and 20 stories. And ultimately, the developers advanced an application to the committee to increase the height of the front tower to 15 stories and the rear tower to 20 stories. And as long as the application is deemed to be minor in nature, meeting the general intent of the official plan, the general intent of the zoning bylaw, and deemed to be appropriate and desirable for the property and the surrounding area, then the Committee of Adjustment can grant authority to do so. So, based on that original application, or that application in 2019, the committee did grant them a slight height increase, which is what they used to secure the recent site plan approval. But beyond that, the current request, in staff's opinion, was not minor in nature. And as a result, the owners have submitted this zone change application to ask for height relief that is beyond what we would generally consider to be a minor request.
Okay, thank you for that, Joel. I appreciate that. Just a follow-up. Without understanding the original sort of Section 37 bonusing framework, does what they received through the minor variance, is it subject to the original bonusing agreement? In other words, are we looking at the extra 100 units for a theoretical Section 37 bonusing agreement, or do the units that they obtained through the Committee of Adjustment for Minor Relief also apply to a theoretical Section 37 agreement?
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Bodley, great question. The original zoning that was done in 2013 established that maximum density permission of 9 bedrooms per hectare. That's the number that the developer is working towards. So, because the original site-specific set out those 4 items for bonusing, the underground parking, private art, public realm, enhanced landscaping, and the LEED silver, the requirements or the parameters around the bonusing are generally defined. However, because council, in our opinion, modified the eligible bonusing items in 2017 as part of stationary planning, that one item of underground parking needs to be reconsidered in our mind. So the way staff are looking at it at this point in time, before we've done a detailed review, is that 3 of the bonusing items continue to exist, being the private art and the public realm, the enhanced landscaping, and the silver requirement, but that underground parking piece needs to be reconsidered. And that will be part of our review of the application in consultation with the property owner. So it's an unusual situation for sure, in that council has already kind of preset the bonusing framework based on that 2013 or so approval. But now that we're in 2020, we're advancing this application, we certainly have to have regard for the policy framework that's in effect today.
Very interesting. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it.
I don't see any further questions from council at this time, Joel. So this is back to my paperwork here. We do have one registered delegation to come forward, and that is Harry Fruzio, Senior Associate, Link Up Preamble Limited. Welcome, Harry. I understand you do not have a PowerPoint, but you have commentary.
Yes, good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and all who are monitoring this application. My name is Harry Frucios. I represent the landowners for this application. I just want to start off by thanking Joel and his staff for their efforts in bringing this application forward for consideration this evening, and also for staff working with us on several previous applications related to the development of these lands. I'm just going to summarize what Joel said basically, and that this zoning amendment will permit our client to maximize the overall density that was previously approved by council for the development of these lands combined with phase 1 at 330 Phillip Street, simply by increasing the height of the two towers that have recently received site plan approval. Other than the increase in the height and the parking, which is more of a technicality, I believe, because there is sufficient parking for both phases, as was discussed. We're not contemplating any of the relief being required from the zoning bylaw to allow this proposal to move forward. So based on that, I'm just here this evening to answer any questions you may have, and look forward to a recommendation on this in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for making yourself available, and apologies for the lateness. We had some technical difficulties at the start, so I appreciate you bearing with us.
Not a problem.
Great time here. I do have a question from Ward Councillor Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and hi, Harry. I mean, really, through you, I'm asking a question of the proponents and owners of this project. I think they've heard me ask this in private, and I think it's important for me to ask it in public as well. And it's not strictly a planning matter, but because we have you before us for an application, I feel it's appropriate and need to ask it. Certainly, phase 1, in terms of construction completion and tenanting the property, did not go well. And it was an item of significant public discourse and discussion. That is not a planning basis to give any weight or consideration to an approval that we have before us, but I'm wondering if you, on behalf of your clients, have something that council and the community should know about phase 2 and how it will be and how we can be assured that phase 2, as it's being developed and as it may be further approved, will not experience the same problems and will not cause the same hardship for tenants.
Through your worship, and yes, I understand there were issues in the past, Councillor Henry, but the only thing I can say from my vantage point and from what information I know is that this development will be already in compliance with all not only the zoning bylaw, but the Ontario Building Code and any other bylaws that exist. And to that extent, I can assure you that that's what's being proposed. Beyond that, I can't comment on if there's anything else that if there's an issue, but I can assure you that it's my client's intent to make sure they comply with all relevant bylaws and like I said, the Ontario Building Code.
So I appreciate that, Harry, that's sticking to your expertise and the dime you're being paid. I would encourage when this comes back to a formal public meeting for the applicants themselves to sort of be available to take questions outside of the planning realm, because I think that's one that I know many of my constituents would like to hear about as this goes through a formal planning approval, recognizing those aren't planning matters, but this is the forum that we have for your client to be able to speak to the future tenants that will make this property possible for them to be able to occupy, and give them those assurances that are not planning assurances, but are assurances I think the community would want to hear from.
Thank you, and I can advise that my client is listening in tonight, so notes taken. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Henry, and thank you, Harry. I do not see any further councillors with their hands up. So thank you very much, Harry. You can
sit down and breathe easy. We're done with questions. Thanks for being a delegate.
Thank you.
As Deputy Clerk informs me, there are no further speakers. This informal public meeting is now concluded. Staff will review the issues and provide further reporting to council at a later date. We move on. I should just read that notification that we have deferred the next item, which is the official plan amendment, 26, the zone change application set 1903, Village West Mountain Plaza, deferred to a later date, will not be considered by council tonight, November 2nd, 2020. This is a formal public meeting to consider zoning bylaw amendment Z2001, extension amendment to temporary use zoning bylaw 2020-049, SOLER, for our local economic recovery initiative, City of Waterloo. Any persons who want further notice of this application, including the passage of any bylaw, should contact the planner for the city, Joel Cotter, at 519-747-8543. Or his email address, joel.cotter@waterloo.ca, that's joel.cotter@waterloo.ca. Will the clerk please advise council of the method used to give notice of the meeting and the date notice was given?
Notice was advertised in the Waterloo Chronicle on October 15th, 2022. Sorry, 2020.
Get ahead of yourself there. Or tired, one of the two. If you'd like to speak at the public meeting today, please call the clerk's office immediately at 519-747-8705. That's 519-747-8705. We are standing by for you to be added to the list of delegation. The planner, Joel Cotter, will now give a brief overview of the application. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, and residents listening in this evening. This is a formal public meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment to extend and amend bylaw 2020-049, which enacts or enables part of the solar initiative that was approved by council in June of this year. I'd just like to say that this has been a joint effort between the Planning Division, Economic Development, and Municipal Enforcement in relation to the solar initiative. And we jointly brought a report forward to council on October the 5th to seek construction from council to extend the solar program, which would have expired in December of this year, one additional year until December 31st, 2021. Council authorized that extension in principle on October 5th, and as a result of council's direction, we are bringing forward this report, which is the Planning Act component of solar, seeking to amend the temporary use zoning bylaw by extending it one additional year to December 31st, 2021. And we've also taken the opportunity to expand the solar program in 3 areas. The first area is to allow for instances in the zoning bylaw which restrict commercial uses to the ground floor, to temporarily allow those uses to be extended to the second floor of the building until December 31st, 2021, so for 1 year. And this will help generally likely smaller businesses within the community that may occupy, for example, a former single detached house that has retail or restaurant or cafe on the ground floor and unoccupied space above. And it will allow those instances to allow for businesses expansion indoors during the winter season, but still remain subject to obtaining a solar license or a licensing program, and if a building permit would be required, a building permit. The second extension piece is to allow semi-permanent structures, such as tents on commercial lands or accessory structures in yards, that would typically solar license and compliance with the Ontario Building Code, and that would be temporary until December 31st, 2021. The final extension piece that staff are recommending is to permit light manufacturing, assembly, processing of personal protective equipment and supplies, PPE, in 4 different zones: the business employment 1, business employment 2, stationary and business employment 2A, and stationary business employment 2B zones. Those are typically our light manufacturing zones that are restricted to advanced tech, but we feel comfortable allowing, on an interim basis or a temporary basis, light manufacturing for PPE, given the current pandemic. And we are recommending that that be permitted until November 1st, 2023, which is the upper limit of how long these types of temporary use bylaws are permitted. So this is set forth in our staff report. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. And again, we are simply just advancing the technical requirements to implement council's direction as of November 5.
Thank you, Joel. I do have a question here from Councillor Bonagor. Hold on. Councillor Bonagor and Councillor Hammer. Please go ahead, Councillor Bonagor.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Mr. Cotter, thank you very much for bringing all of this together. The team, or a multi-departmental team, has been very creative in finding solutions to some very real problems that businesses in the uptown are facing, at least. There was a little bit of concern from some nearby residents, so I would just like to give you to double check to set people's minds at ease that this proposal does not extend the time period for the temporary patios beyond what was already permitted. That's correct, yes?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Bonagor, that is correct. The recommendations before council is to extend the temporary patios for 1 year till December 31st, 2021. I will also note that the bylaw that is drafted allows council to revoke permissions on a property or a use-specific basis, and that is also combined with protection measures that council has through its licensing program with the business licensing bylaw. So there's a number of protection measures to make sure that land use compatibility or other concerns that may arise from time to time or may be context specific can be addressed appropriately.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think there'll be some uptown residents that are just feeling a little more reassured at having heard that. Thank you.
Next up, I have Councillor Hammer. Oh, I see that you don't have a question.
No, thank you to Councillor Bonagor and to Mr. Cotter for the response. That was exactly my question, so I have nothing further.
Excellent. Thank you. With that, Joel, as a reminder to any person watching, if you'd like to see further notices of application, you can contact Joel Cotter at joel.cotter@waterloo.ca. That's joel.cotter@waterloo.ca. I will now look to the deputy clerk to inform me if we've had any delegations come in. And I know many of my counselors have worked on the Kids Ability, Kids Can't Wait telethon, and you're answering the phone, and the phone's ringing off the hook. Well, that's bad news for you, Joel. The phone has not run off the hook, and we have nobody that's called in. Which I think is a good thing. We have to think you're doing excellent work. As deputy clerk informs me, there are no further speakers for this formal public meeting. It is concluded, and the application is now open to council for a motion and debate. And I will look to Ward 7 councillor to take us forward.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski, and through you, I am happy on behalf of many of the uptown businesses who will benefit from this to move the to read it all out, man. To move it. Yes, okay, let's go. To move that the council approve report IPPW 2020-077 That council approve the extension and expansion of the temporary use zoning bylaw 2020-049 SOLER initiative pursuant to section 39 of the Planning Act as set forth in IPPW 2020-077. And that council delegate authority to the city's Director of Economic Development and to the city solicitor to permit temporary structures to be placed in whole or in part on municipal lands as set forth in IPPW 2020-077 as part of the city's solar initiative. I'm happy to move that and will be voting in favour.
But I bet you don't have the Bill 73 wording in front of you. But if you did, did you?
No.
What's in your mouth? I bet you would say, whereas council has considered all written and oral submissions from the public and stakeholders, and whereas council has considered the professional opinions of planning staff, therefore be it resolved that we approve these three items that we well read out. And I think you would agree with that, right? I'll take that as a yes.
I'm back in the new government. Yes, thank you very much.
Good, all good. Okay, so we'll to Ward 1, please.
Thank you. Councillor Henry is happy to second this motion as it will benefit businesses large and small throughout our community, and I will vote in favor of the motion.
Councillor Waterloo is in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor. Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
And the mayor is in favor too. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Joel and team, for your continued work on helping our local businesses during these pandemic times. We need to do whatever we can, and these are just more tools in the toolbox for our great local small businesses. So thanks very much, team. With that, we move onward to questions. Does any councillor have any questions of staff? We'll just pause for a moment.
It's Councillor Freeman. I did want to move the motion with regard to the regional council all council meeting.
Yeah, we'll get that under new business. Right now, we're just looking at questions. We've separated out into council procedures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. But I don't see any questions. I know that Councillor Bassick has something. So why don't we go ahead with the new business, Councillor Freeman of the all council meeting, to make sure I don't miss that. Thanks for the reminder.
Sure, I'm happy to move a motion to approve the posted agenda for the all council meeting to be held at regional council chambers. And I'm going to have to get someone to help me with the date. I don't remember.
What I have here, the council approved participation in one of two joint meetings. So is this one or is also just this one? Okay, for the council of the regional municipality of Waterloo and all area municipalities in the region of Waterloo, Monday, December 7th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. or on Friday, December 18th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. for the purpose of joint education and training.
Perfect. I'm happy to move that as you just read it.
And you probably will vote for it too.
And I vote in favor.
Excellent.
Councillor Bassick, I second and vote in favor.
Councillor Henry, vote in favor.
Councillor Bonner in favour.
Councillor Handler in favor.
Councillor Waterloo in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor.
And the mayor's in favor too, that education is carried unanimously. Over to Councillor Bassick, please. Thank you.
Thanks through you, Mayor Jaworski. Ward 5 was a really happening place on the weekend. And last week, Rosalie Park finally got its, not finally, but didn't take that long actually, but got its playground, which was, it's beautiful. It was a huge effort by the community Lincoln Heights neighborhood group that really spearheaded it. Tons of people donated, got a matching grant, staff worked so well with the community, and there's a board, like a community notice board, and an extra bench, and they upgraded the benches, and there's little kind of game boards, and they got an extra twirly slide. So it's just a huge community effort, and I just wanted to thank everybody who has put time and love into it, and they really see this place as a real hub, and they've been wanting that for a long time, they said, and so it's just wonderful to be a part of making that vision come forward. So thanks to everybody on that. Saturday was Halloween, and the neighborhood, all led by one resident who just really wanted to find a way to make sure that everyone could safely trick-or-treat, organized spectacular trick-or-treating. So there were 5 stations, and people went from station to station. I think there were about 80 kids registered, and more than 100 people came out and were safely distanced. And there were a couple of churches also in the area that had their own distanced events, and a few neighbors along the way had put treats up. But really it all came together because this one woman organized it. Several volunteers put candy together, decorated and manned stations, and another huge community mobilization effort. I was blown away. It was so wonderful to have a safe, fun event that was so huge. And then the third piece is the Vermont Park Neighborhood Association and Lakewood Harmony have been working on a community garden for years. Also really spearheaded by another resident, and I was a part of a group yesterday that came to expand the garden. That's going to be led, the community garden piece is going to be led by the Indigenous Food Sovereignty Collective of Waterloo Region. That's just come together this year to really champion food sovereignty and harvesting seeds that are otherwise being endangered because of mass production of food and modified food in not great ways. And so it was really a beautiful coming together. I was really grateful to be a part of it, and it's wonderful to see that community garden take off with, again, a big community mobilized effort with support of city staff. So anyways, it was just like a huge weekend in Ward 5, and we don't have a lot of huge weekends, it feels like right now, because of COVID, and I was really blown away and really moved and grateful to be a part of it.
I think that just goes to prove that why we depend so much on our neighborhood building and building neighborliness. That's the only way to go. Councillor Hanlon and Councillor Boniver.
Thank you. Ward 1 was also the happening place this weekend, and so just a shout out to all of the home associations and neighborhood associations who organized afternoon either parades or game events for the kids to participate in Halloween. It was amazing to see the amount of spirit that was throughout the neighborhoods, and certainly a good indication of people wanting to do things socially distanced or physically distant, and still have some fun while doing it. So shout out and congratulations to all the leaders in Ward 1 who made it happen for the rest of the residents in Ward 1.
Excellent. Thank you for being my wonderful Ward 1 councillor. Over to you, Councillor Boniver.
Well, thank you through you, Mayor Jaworski. I'm detecting a theme here, so I'll keep it short. I also just wanted to recognise all of the people across the city and Ward 7 in particular, just for bringing such spirit to a really strange Halloween and making so many kids feel a tiny slice of normal. For weeks leading up to Halloween, every current discussion was around logistics of what to do safely, and we had everything from a costume parade to a house decorating competition to a candy pult, which was flinging candy through the streets. And I just really want to commend and thank all of the residents for just banding together and showing ourselves and each other what we're capable of. So thank you, and well done, everyone.
And of course, the BIA had a wonderful turnout at the Uptown event.
hundreds upon hundreds of people, and that's where I saw the people using the new pedestrian crossing that we put on Regina Street. It was going on, being used all the time to safely cross there. So wonderful. I'll be sending commentary to Tracy and the team of the Uptown DA for a job well done as well, Councillor Bonnegood, who sits on their board. Over to you, Councillor Freeman.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I heard wonderful, wonderful comments about what was going on in Uptown. A lot of folks from my ward trekked out and just loved the effort that was made by the stores uptown. And the Eastbridge Neighborhood Association did a drive-through event for their community, sponsored by one of the grocery stores in town. They had made up 500 bags. I think they went through them all. And then in addition to that, I thought it was so exciting. The brand new neighborhood association has just been putting itself on the map in the Fox Hunt area. And they had families sign up, and they had house delivery of special treats to children in the Fox Hunt neighborhood by 5 witches. And it was incredibly exciting to just see kind of new faces in the neighborhood taking leadership roles. It was just great.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And with that, I think we're done with business, but I do know all of our wards had, really thought-provoking ideas in all the neighborhoods, so really appreciate the neighborliness that has come through in Waterloo. And now, the special time when I call upon Councillor Bodley, I bet you know what time that is.
Excuse me. It's my time to shine. Councilor Bodley here. I would like to move the enactment bylaws as written, and I would like to vote in favor of them. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Councillor Wreath here, I will second that motion and vote in favor.
And Councillor Freeman votes in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Monaco in favor.
Councillor Hammer in favor.
The mayor is in favor too. Thank you very much. I carried unanimously. And just before we move to adjourn, I'll look the senator taking forward on that. Special shout out to the clerk's office and the clerk's team for managing through the technical switch cable difficulties earlier this afternoon and ensuring that, despite the fact that it's dark outside, we did get everything accomplished today that we wanted to. So a special shout out to our great clerk's team. Over to you, Councilor Hammer.
Thank you. I move that we adjourn our meeting, and I will vote in favor.
Councilor Bodley will second that motion and also vote in favor.
Councillor Wreath in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor. Councillor Bassick in favor.
Councillor Henry in favor.
Councillor Monaco in favor.
And there's in favor too. We stand adjourned. Have a good evening.